So I don't know how many of you have got a chance to read and deeply, deliberate on the NEP and its implication. Today we are going to have a higher level, broader discussion with experts from outside, complementing the discussion of our senior leaders, so that we all get an opportunity to look at different dimensions. But subsequently, what we should do is I'm planning to request you to set up a session for our faculty, internal faculty, head of the department, principals all together, discussing in details the various dimensions of this new education policy and its impact on curriculum, pedagogy, teaching, assessment, the whole all dimensions, and how it is going to, at the operating level. Today we are more looking at the strategic level, more at the operating tactical level. So I would encourage all our faculty and teachers to sort of do reading, thinking, reflect on it, and say how it is going to impact. Even the way teacher education itself is going to make a big difference, and they expect that by 2030 it will become a part of a larger multicultural, multilingual, or multidisciplinary colleges. So we are lucky that our school is one such one. So we should plan to see how it is going to progress together. That I remember reading somewhere long ago that education is what stays with you after you've forgotten everything that has been taught in your school and college. It's a very deep thought. What is expected of education is how has it transformed and empowered or engaged each of us to be a better student, a better teacher, a better professional, a better social, being, and how what we have leveled up, what we have learned, and the skills we have acquired, and the attitude and philosophies that we have imbibed is going to determine how we behave as part of the society. That was the intent of education for millions of years. Even if you look at our Indian history, even the schools like Nalanda and all that was there thousands of years ago was built on this basic philosophy. But I feel that unfortunately in the recent past there had been a certain degeneration into more focusing more on memorizing and rote-based education, which are just checking our children's ability to memorize facts, figures, and attempt a test without significantly understanding or imbibing what is meant by it, or how to use those learning in our day-to-day life. There have been a lot of thoughts and concerns. Biju Dominic is, he's lead panelist, and he's a CEO and co-founder of Final Mile Consulting. He is highly dedicated professional, has a very deep understanding on human behavior. So he pioneered the practice of behavioral architecture by combining learning from cognitive neuroscience, behavioral economics, and design. He is also a member of the advisory board of MJC, and we are very excited to have him participate today with us. Thank you, Biju. We have Guru Maladi. He's a senior partner with Ernst & Young. He's a panelist today. He has been in EY for nearly 20 years. He was a very senior partner leading government and public sector consulting in India, working on very, very large and prestigious transformational agenda for the government of India and many other governments across the world. We have Sunil Chandiramani. He's a panelist, founder and CEO of NYKA Advisory. He has 28 years of diverse industry experience in providing strategic, financial, and operational leadership. He was formerly the head of the advisory of Ernst & Young India, with a very, very reputed and international, and is a person of international standing. We have C.P. Viswanath. He's also a panelist. He's the CEO and director of Karadi Path Education. He's an educator, a musician, and an entrepreneur. He has more than 13 years of international experience. He's a co-founder of one of the best loved India's children entities, Karadi Tales, and he has been a visionary behind the new learning methodology called Karadi Path. And I've had the opportunity to get a little exposure of them, of this whole idea, and we're very excited about it. And I believe that this kind of approach will definitely be a major contributor in the the philosophy behind the educational new education policy. And we hope to have we are happy to have him with us. Now we have Raj Gilda. He's a co-founder of Lend a Hand India. Before I introduce him, I would like to say thanks to him for joining in with us for the session. He lost his father a couple of days ago to COVID, and in spite of that, he is. We all express our deep condolence to you, Raj, and we are extremely thankful for your willingness to join us in the session today. He's a banker turned a social entrepreneur, co-founder of Lend a Hand India, an NGO which is focused on providing vocational education in secondary schools in India. And as probably many of you have read the national education new education policy, vocational training is going to be a very key component of the new educational policy. And we believe that since he has been working in this area for quite some time and experimenting and implementing this in different schools, we are very happy that he is going to be with us to provide his points of view. Now, if I introduce some insiders, we have, as panelists, we have Elizabeth, who is the head of operations, trustee and head of operation of MJC. She is very passionate towards this cause and bringing an expertise in relationship building, innovation, risk management, process engineering, and so on. We have, and happy to have you here, Elizabeth. We have Mathew Francis. He's the CEO of MJC. He has 38 years of experience in leadership positions with corporates. He's, in the past few years, he has taken over the mantle of the running MJC, along with me, and he's playing a very, very key role in building the future for MJC. His experience involved variety of projects, including head of commercial of setting up the first greenfield airport in the country. I mean, so with this wide variety of experience, he has been now in the past few years guiding the growth path for MJC. Thank you, Mathew, for being as a part of the panel. In addition to the eminent panelists from our from external panelists, we also have our fellow faculty and well-wishers. So let me just commend some of the well-wishers who were sort of joined to be a part of this, the deliberation. We have a team from EY who is working on the extra project. Some of the members are who have been working very closely with the Ministry of Education on this project are also joining us in this program. We have Sasi, who is a very, who has been a fellow partner with us in EY and currently a successful entrepreneur, does a lot of work in the area of EdTech, as well as, being a mentor for many of the education institutions. Thanks, Asifi, for joining us today. And we have, last but not the least, I have to especially thank the principals, Ravi of College of Education, Nazeema of College of Arts and Science, and Anitha of our school, and the fellow teachers and the colleagues for joining us today in this deliberation. So with this introduction, let me just proceed towards our session today. So the agenda is that, to begin with, we have multiple sessions. The first session is dismantling the distinction between art, science, and commerce. This session is going to be handled by Biju. Let me just share one thought with all of us, that because of because we have a very wide and topics to be covered, and we have many eminent panelists, sharing their points of view. I'm just going to play the role of a timekeeper. So each of us had been given certain amount of time for presenting our thoughts. And as the time here, probably I'll just raise my hand for you guys to remember on this. And similarly, any of the questions, please keep posting them on the side. I, as a moderator, as and when it's relevant, I'll pull it in. So the first, let me welcome Biju for the first session, dismantling the distinction between art, science, and commerce. Biju, for you.
Yeah. Hi. Good afternoon. Good evening, everyone. I think it's great discussing about the national education policy with everyone. And thank you, Koshy, Liz, and Mathew for inviting me to be part of this particular panel. I've gone through the national education policy document several times. And if I have to take and there are a lot of good things about it, And if I had to take one good thing, and I would say, which is my favorite, and I think incidentally, that's exactly what Koshy has asked me to speak on, and that is all about this whole bringing in this multidisciplinary perspective to learning, and which we are now calling it, obviously, dismantling the distinction between arts, science, and commerce, and all the things. And I thought it's an outstanding direction that our education is actually taking. If all of us know, especially I'm talking about the older generation, all of us knew that our so-called traditional way of doing things was almost at 8th standard, 9th standard, you were almost told that this is what you're going to do in your 11th and 12th. And that was the determinant, the first group, second group, or called the commerce group. And therein you almost got into one of those streams. So either as an engineer, as a doctor, as a commerce graduate, you moved in, and then you got a job into one of those areas. And the whole throughout your life, you almost focused on that one area. A decision that you took somewhere in your 8th standard, 9th standard tends to become your lifelong, decision. And at any point of time, for example, if we were to look back, someone who took, say, for example, science in his 11th and 12th, and if he or she, due to some reason, had actually moved to, say, literature during the graduation, they would have a lot of questions raised. Hey, what happened? And the whole thing was, if you shift from one to the other, it was seen as something is wrong with you, because you're expected to just move only in one straight line. And if you moved somewhere else, it was seen as not really appropriate. And that's the way our education system has been around for a long, long time. And those of us who have been working in the corporate world know one thing, that this education system possibly created some of us who I possibly assume as an engineer, I had the technical capability to start entering into a job. But many times, the moment I was given a certain responsibility as a leader, and I had to take on certain, leadership, qualities, which means I had to go slightly beyond my technical capability. And as you moved higher and higher in the organization, you were involved less and less in your technical capability and involved in more wider skills were required. And many a time you found that there were people who were extremely good in their technical skills, somewhere falling by the wayside because, assume you would have been an extremely good engineer, by his understanding of how to deal with people, his understanding of how to deal with finance, how to look at, a lot of those would not have been there. And because of that, he never really took off and went on to do well in life. And that we have seen it. But in the last about 4 or 5 years, especially, I think we've seen a dramatic shift within our youngsters. Our youngsters are saying that, unlike the previous generation who actually went in for a job immediately after their graduation or post-graduation, today's youngsters are saying, no, I'll do something by myself. which means a lot of them want to be entrepreneurs. And I see that in IIT Mumbai, for example. The number of kids who actually want to start something on their own is very, very large. Now, as entrepreneurs, it is very clear, and there are experts here who would have even guided a lot of those entrepreneurs, that it's not enough that you have technical capability. That means right immediately after your graduation or post-graduation, as you begin your entrepreneurial journey, you need to have now skills not in your technical capability, but you need to have financial skills. You need to know all about finance. You need to know about cash flows and how to generate and all that. You need to have understanding of, say, personnel management, how to hire, how to motivate, how to, what's the salary structures and what are the reward system, what is compensation system, what do you need to do? The marketing, how do I understand my consumer? It's not enough that I have a brilliant product, but how do I make sure that this product is loved by the consumer? Which means the number of skills that you need as an entrepreneur are definitely multifaceted. Now, is our existing education system really helping us to be preparing our kids to be extremely good entrepreneurs who are well-rounded? No. As I said before, I think it has always been, one single track. And that is where I think the relevance of our new education policy comes in, which says, now let the kids right in the beginning grow in a multidisciplinary environment. But the good thing is that this is not just new to India. Now, if you look at the older, the traditional Indian educational system, and as the education policy also very clearly says, every kid, every student was supposed to know 64 kalas. Those kalas involved painting, dancing, understanding, the nuances of painting, dancing, obviously mathematics, physics, to communication, to debate, so I think we had a traditional education system that really allowed a very holistic and a multidisciplinary perspective, and that's the way our Indian education system was. But somewhere along the way, we went into the single track. And this is where I think I really admire that this is actually is in the right direction. And I'm sure some of you would have heard of, obviously, this great mathematician, called Manjul Bhargav, because in mathematics, the ultimate award is, some people say it is even higher than Nobel Prize, because Nobel Prize is given out every year. But the highest award in mathematics is the Fields Medal, and that is given only once in 4 years. And the man who won that in 2014 was an Indian, and Manjul Bhargav. And that's who received it at the age of just 40. And he's seen as an outstanding, mathematician. And when I think there was a very interesting interview in NDTV with Manjul, and he talks about his school days when he says, I hated my mathematics class. So much so he said, I used to skip my mathematics class, because the reason he said is mathematics is beautiful, but the way it was being taught was not beautiful. But somewhere his mother was a mathematician, and and his mother actually then used to give him puzzles and games, and overall, and now he's a great professor in mathematics in Princeton University. Now, how does he teach mathematics? For example, he teaches mathematics because he comes from an underlying belief that mathematics is art. Oh, because many times we thought mathematics is science. He said, no, mathematics is art. He says, yeah, mathematics in there is one solution. But the way you need to approach that solution is not in one way. But in a lot of schools, you always teach only one way. Now, if this is it, now this is the way to achieve that particular answer or reach the right answer. But he says, no, let me allow the students to look at it in different ways. And one other thing he actually says is, mathematics, when he's teaching mathematics, for example, in his freshman year in Princeton, he teaches that because he is also a tablaist. He's learned tabla under Zakir Hussain. His grandfather was a great Sanskrit scholar. And he's taken all those learnings, and he actually now comes into the class with the tabla in the mathematics class. Now, what has tabla got to do with mathematics? And then he actually goes on to also recite Sanskrit slokas. And then he says, okay, now the way the beats are actually arranged, the number of, it's one beat or it's two beats, I think there is a mathematics about it. And then he goes on to say, for example, in Sanskrit poetry, for example, in Sanskrit poetry, Marathi poetry, and most of the poetries have a right way of capturing the number of this beats involved there. And then he talks about this very famous Sanskrit poet called Hemachandra, who actually has said, if there are only 8 slots there, how many combinations can I really have, or 1 beat or 2 beat, so that I can fill up the rest of my poetry? Now, if you really look at it, he gives an answer to how to do it. Much later, that was realized that was actually Fibonacci number. How do you really arrive at that particular number? So when you really look at the Sanskrit slokas and the way it is constructed, or the way the tabla beats are created, there's a lot of mathematics out there. So he does a lot of card tricks. So his class is all about these things. Now, just imagine, that's what the greatest mathematician of our times is almost telling us. That in this tradition, in our approach, instead of looking at it from a very singular, one-track method, if you start looking at it from multiple angles, you suddenly make the whole, that learning into a far more evocative perspective. As Koshy was mentioning about education, it's not about what you forget. For example, I know you and I all learned in school which was the year in which the first year of Panipat happened, second year of Panipat happened, some great Maratha wars happened. I'm sure we all have forgotten those years. But what if our teachers had taught us and said, what is the significance of each of those particular wars on the history of this particular country? And I think this multidisciplinary perspective is also teaching us, the students, to look at things in different angles. And I think some schools do. For example, when my daughter was in her 9th standard, I still remember her teacher gave her an extremely, I think it was in 11th standard in St. Xavier's College. The teacher gave her a very interesting question. The question was looking at Indian freedom movement through the eyes of Subhash Chandra Bose. Wow. And I think as part of that, she had to learn. And I think one of the assumptions she took was, what if Germany had won? And what if Germany had won the war, Subhash Chandra Bose would have been the most powerful politician in this country, because Germany would have completely backed Subhash Chandra Bose. And then, would this be the way things are? But at least, I know the world has moved in a different way, but at least allowing us to say that, it is just, where we are today is also because the British won the war. If Germany had done the war, maybe India might have moved in a completely different direction. At least it's forcing our kids to think in a different way. I think, and that involves, I think, the ability to look at whatever we do from multiple angles. And that comes to my last point. Yes, it's very, very nice to say, yes, multidisciplinary perspective is very, very important, is very good. But how does we as teachers prepare ourselves? It was very, very easy, because since the teachers also come from that singular track learning, okay, I do that, I take, say, mathematics in my BSc, I do MSc in mathematics, or then I come and do my BA, I focus on it, I'll teach mathematics and go. Now don't ask me anything else. Don't ask me about Sanskrit literature, or don't ask me about English literature, because I've come to teach mathematics. And it was so easy for us to do that. But now as teachers, we are forced to now have multidisciplinary perspective to what we teach. If I'm teaching chemistry, or if I'm teaching physics, say chemistry, obviously I have to speak about the carbon dioxide and oxygen and climate control. It has to be an integral part of it. Because carbon dioxide and production of it, and removing carbon dioxide through a biological process where the trees are coming in, is very much climate control. And then chemistry and climate control cannot be separate in a class, which means the teachers also definitely have to have a multifaceted or multidimensional perspective to their teaching. And no wonder, I think the education policy is very clearly saying, which means the teachers' training programs have to undergo a change. And by 2030, they already are telling, and I know MJC, we also have a teacher's training program. They're saying that the teacher's training program, which is the B.Ed courses, have to integrate with the other departments like the psychology, literature, and all other this and there. And by 2030, all the teachers' training programs have to become multidisciplinary. The whole training program have to become multidisciplinary. So it is a beautiful direction of taking it. And I know the whole classes will no more be boring. It will become far more multidimensional. It will actually become far more interesting. And as Manjul Bhargav's students are sort of thronging, it is actually one of the most loved courses in Princeton, where because the whole thing is being taught, as he says, is fun. Mathematics becomes fun because he actually gives some card tricks or some other tricks, and then asks them, or he plays tabla, and then in that process you learn mathematics. That is far more easy than learning by heart certain programs. So formulas. So that change is brilliant, but easier said than done, because that change can happen only if our teachers also manage to change. And I think teachers have to become then multidimensional in their approach, which means our teachers' training programs also have to become multidimensional. Yes, it's an interesting and extremely interesting development there, and I really look forward to play some role in making this a reality. Thank you. Koshy, you're on mute.
Sorry, Biju. That was a fantastic 15-minute session on how we should, break the walls between this multiple streams, which, as you said, forces us to choose what we want to do in our life when we are as young as 14 or 15 years ago, 14 or 15 years in age. So now let me invite Vish to talk about multilingualism and importance of three-language policy. As you're aware, that the NEP provides for each of the board to consider, each of the state board to consider, the idea of a three-language approach to follow. And we have wished to discuss in detail its implication and its relevance and its advantage for all of us. Thank you, Vish.
Good Over to you. Namaskaram to everybody. That was fascinating, Biju. I think enjoyed hearing the story of Manjul Bhargava, and I had planned on talking about a few things, and I'm going to take the liberty of slightly moving away from what I had planned on talking about. And I am going to actually take off from where you left, which is talking about the multidisciplinary element, and then segue that into the language policy. So I'm going to actually sing a song, okay? So here it goes. My name is Madhavi, I am from Alapi, I speak Malayalam, but I'm just like you. My name is Nattavar, I'm from Srinagar, I speak Kashmiri, but I'm just like you. My name is Shubhrata, I'm from Kolkata, I speak Bengali, but I'm just like you. My name is Vasundhara, I'm from Vadodara, I speak Gujarati, but I'm just like you. My name is Shamsher, I'm from Ajmer, I speak Urdu, but I'm just like you. My name is Bindia, I'm from India, I speak Hindi, and I'm just like you, and I'm just like you, and I'm just like you. So this is a song that we created as part of our endeavor several years ago, that we wanted to get the Jack and Jills out of the classroom, rain, rain, go away out of the classroom, and bring in something that is very contextual. At that time, when we thought this was going to be a simple enough endeavor, but in order to compose those 20 rhymes that now comprise what is called Karadi rhymes, the first 2 volumes, it took us about 4 years to do it. Because one of the things that we realized is that when the moment you understand the potential of the child, especially of the younger child, in terms of learning, you say that how do I now pack a lot of elements into this one song? So when you look at My Name is Madhavi, you are learning about the names of people from different places, you're learning about where they come from, you're learning about what they speak. When you see the visual, you'll see what is it that they wear. Then you talk about unity in diversity. So there's a whole range of what you call these multidisciplinary ideas that can actually be packed in if you think and if you work towards the fact that your content must be designed with everything actually coming together. So when you talk about Manjul Bhargava's tabla, I will tell you that in My Name is Madhavi, we train the brain to divide by 3, divide by 7, divide by 5 in the way that the music is composed. We train the brain to recognize the negative values, 0, and positive values on the number line in the way that the tala structure is actually composed there. The raga structure is also something which is which is not a very common raga in Carnatic music called Kuntala Varali, which has mirror images, which means that if you plot this on a graph, you will get all kinds of transpositions happening. Now, you're not trying to teach them mathematics, but you're saying that I'm training the brain in so many different ways. Now, the child may or may not grasp all of this, but eventually this multidisciplinary approach, multiple intelligences being actually nurtured in the space of, let us say, 3 minutes of a song, is something that becomes a reality. And specifically because the context of today's conversation is MJC college and the colleges of education, I think that it is very critical to acknowledge that this is not going to be an easy transition at all. We have been conditioned to, very linear, very narrow approaches to whatever it is that we learn. And there is nothing truer about this than in the way that we, for example, teach language in the classroom. We think it is a subject, we treat it like a subject, and then at the end of the day, we give an assessment, which gives us certain idea about how the child is doing. And sometimes you find that the reality with that child and the assessment don't seem to be matching each other at all, simply because you taught to assessment rather than talk about what are the goals of this language learning that I eventually need to accomplish. In this respect, I'm also going back to what Koshy started with, is education is what is left after you have forgotten all that you have been taught. And the NEP basically, as you said, is actually a very, very visionary document, and I think its vision lies in its nuances in many places. The vision also lies in how you can extrapolate it and what has actually been left unsaid, but at least a direction has been given in terms of what is possible and what is not possible. Specifically with reference to language, one of the things that it actually takes a two-pronged approach to language. One, it looks at language as a way by which to nurture intelligences. It very clearly, for the first time, recognizes the fact that multilingualism is not just about knowing a second language or third language, but that when I nurture multilingualism, I nurture a whole range of intelligences, and anybody who's a neuroscientist will, acknowledge this. This has been adequately, talked about and put out there in terms of the fact that if I know 3 kinds of syntax, if I can engage with 3 kinds of syntax, let's say the Hindi syntax, the Tamil syntax, and the English syntax, that's a very complex accomplishment of the brain. And as a result of that syntax, I am actually better primed for programming and coding, because of the fact that, once again, the ability to deal with syntax is one of those very, very important abilities that needs to come into play as we look at a lot of technology that is around us. So the role of language in nurturing that, technological brain is something that has been actually, in a way, been put out there in the NEP very, very specifically. And while the topic says 3-language formula, actually, it doesn't talk about it as a formula. It talks about multilingualism specifically and says, let's at least ensure that we have 3 languages, because this is a possibility. And in the Indian context, for us, multilingualism is something that we take for granted. Many of us in this room know 3, 4, 5 languages, and we don't consider it a major achievement, because that is how easy language learning can be when you do not take the school approach to language teaching. In terms of so one aspect is, should it be Hindi, should it be Tamil, should it be English, what should the languages that we teach, what do they, the NEP leaves it open to you. You decide what is your ecosystem, you decide what are the capacities that you have, and very, very specifically, they have also talked about building a corpus of teachers who can actually teach these multiple languages, because currently that would be a huge constraint. I mean, today I have several of my colleagues from Isha Vidya, which is a group of rural schools in Tamil Nadu, where I, work on the academic side. One of the biggest demands that we face from parents, and these are deep rural schools, most of them study under scholarship, is that I want you to teach Hindi. Okay, and I, being a language person, I say that there is no way that we will introduce Hindi in our schools, because I cannot find a Hindi teacher who will actually teach Hindi. We will torture the children with the lessons. We will torture them with memorization. And then at the end of 10 years, nothing will be residual, which is true of many people who learned Hindi only in school and never got to actually, enjoy Hindi as a language, or, really the power of the language as well as the joy that the language brings. So this multilingualism is something that the NEP talks about in a very significant manner, and specifically with reference once again to the College of Education that we have. I think that there's a need for us to actually start preparing ourselves for this, for ideas around languages, ideas around neuroscience, because that is again, in the curriculum itself, it does not find any space. Because what we sometimes confuse is, we confuse psychology with neuroscience. I think the two are very, very different fields, and there is a need to understand this at a different scientific level. And it is not very complex. You do not need to become, detailed about it, but at least the process of learning, the process of how does a stimuli result, or how does an exposure result in the stimuli, how the stimuli is actually absorbed, what is the very varied outcome of these stimuli. If I have 10 children in my classroom, how each of those 10 children, what are they taking first? So when I sing a song like My Name is Madhavi, is the experience the same for all of the class? The joy is the same, but what I take from it is actually going to be different. So if there are 20 children there, 20 children are actually going to form very different visuals, they're going to take in different things. But at some point of time, all of these things will coalesce together. And language actually plays a very, very large role in terms of, actually conceiving ideas, conceptualizing ideas, and understanding concepts as well. And so here, I think the controversial element of NEP, which is already leading to a lot of debates. I have been on several panels, is the fact about mother tongue learning in the early ages. So the NEP has said that your medium of instruction, and here it has, kind of created a confusing situation. It has talked about regional language, home language, local language, and mother tongue. And pretty much everybody has understood it as if it is a synonymous statement. These are not synonyms at all. What is the mother tongue can be very different from what is the local language, which can be very different from what is the home language, which can be very different from what is the regional language. So it kind of creates a bit of a conundrum in the way that it has left it, and it is up to us to actually engage in more discussion and think about what is the best way forward. I mean, if I'm in Tamil Nadu, is Tamil language teaching the best option in the early ages? There is a very, very strong argument to say that I must learn in a language that I understand. I don't think that anybody will dispute it. But is the Tamil in the textbook accessible to the Tamil-speaking child in Tamil Nadu? It's actually not. Children fail in Tamil. Tamil-speaking children fail in Tamil. And this is again one of the realities that we must understand, that at the end of the day, if you have to talk about any medium of instruction, which is, in which language, what is the medium of learning, you have to look at how am I going to enable that medium at two levels? One is at a functional level, which is that I can have a conversation with you. And second is at what we call an academic literacy. So functional literacy and then academic literacy, which means that if you are going to explain LCM to me in class 4, I know how to do the operation, I can get the answer, but I don't know what I did. I have no idea what LCM is. I know the full form of LCM, least common multiple. Nothing makes sense to me in 4th standard. And I go through, and a large number of people who have gone through school still do not know what LCM is. You know, so some of us who have had to apply it at a later point in time were forced to learn it at a later point. So language plays a very, very rich role in conceptual understanding, whether it is science or mathematics or geography or history or whatever. And it plays a very critical role in some of the other elements that are mentioned in the NEP, which is learning through discovery and learning to learn, enabling these two capacities of learning to learn, because you simply cannot define what is the nature of the world 10 years from now, 20 years from now. What is the knowledge base that I need to have? And hence, like many of us who have been probably more privileged, some of us have learned to learn better. Despite our education system, we have actually survived that education system. Now that is a very divisive approach. And as many of you have been, have interviewed several people, you will realize that critical thinking and creative thinking is probably one of the things that you struggle. I mean, why is this simple idea so difficult for you to understand? At the root of this is the fact that language to comprehension, to conceptual learning, to critical thinking, to creativity, this segue actually never happens in school. The curriculum does not place any expectations, but the NEP has given several indications that this can be a very good beginning. So thank you very much. I hope that was useful.
Thank you, Vish. You gave a fantastic dimension to the impact of learning multiple languages, not just for communication, but also in shaping the brains and shaping the way we think. I'm very, very thankful to you, and I love the song. I have also had you send me the original composition that your team has developed, and I have shared that to MJC, and I'm sure that many of the people who are participating would have the opportunity to look at it. If they haven't looked at it, I'm sure they will look at it now that they see the song in a completely different perspective of not just a tune, not just like a nursery rhyme, but as something that has the ability to tickle different parts of the brain and bring different impressions and learnings by just simple nursery rhyme. Thank you, Viswanath. Now the third session is going to be focus on sustainable development goals, history and culture and ethos of India. We have Guru Maladi, one of the our advisory board members, and he has also shared some time back his journey of education and not just the fear of going to school, but what he has learned all along the way. And today he's going to talk on this important dimension of the new education policy. Welcome, Guru. Over to you.
Thank you, Koshy. Thank you, Biju, for that tabla example and Manju Bhargava. I think it's a very and CP for that wonderful rendition. It's a fantastic song. I really enjoyed it, and I think you've also rendered that very well. Thank you for all of that. So obviously, after talking about the multifaceted education system that the NEP 2020 is fostering, and also talking about multi-linguistic nature and the propositions that we have in the policy, Koshy has given me this hard task of talking about some dry subject called SDGs, which is strategic development goals, sustainable development goals, sorry. So I think what I will do is let me just step back a bit, and I think as both speakers earlier to me has mentioned, there is much packed in this 70 odd pages of this policy. Now, for those of you who are aware of the whole process, the original document that they submitted was close to about 400 pages, which is what Dr. Kasturirangan and his team have sort of put together. And I think, what we are now seeing is a fine filtered coffee, right? So that's essentially what we're looking at. So let's put this in some context. So we're essentially talking about a policy, and by the way, this is a policy, so it is not a legal document, nor is it does not have any constitutionality to it, right? It's a simple document that helps us as more directional, and therefore, whatever are the provisions that are addressed in this document, we as an institution can also look at and see how we can implement that for the benefit of our own institutions, which is the original intention of this session that we wanted to have. So effectively, if you see, a lot of focus is on primary education. I think, as someone who's worked with governments for a long periods of time, I think there are two fields that are widely neglected in India, and as a result, whatever are the development indices that we measure ourselves, we have not been able to progress. And those two areas are respect, the successive governments, both at center and states, their apathy towards primary health and their apathy towards primary education. And until these two are reformed and brought to a level where forget about, making it the best in the world, but at least, imbibe some of the value systems that we've had historically in this country in the education system, we have very bleak future, to look up to. And I don't want to get into the reasons as to why such a change has happened and why our systems have degraded to an extent that we today are talking about, how the reform needs to happen. So the reality is that I think those children who start school this year, they start in year 5, in their year 5 in class 1, they'll probably retire in 2075, right? And by the time that they finish their graduation and go out and start looking for a job or be an entrepreneur, it would be 2038. So we are in 2020, and the last education policy, the reform that was done in this country, was 28 years ago, right? So in 28 years, in a sporting parlance, we would have seen 4 generations, right? I think in the education parlance, probably we would have seen 3, if not 2 generations. So we pretty much produced, and we love to call them batch, right? As if we are producing a batch of pharmaceuticals or a batch of industrial equipment or a batch of automotive cars. We love to call our students also batches. So we produce these batches who have resulted, I think in year 28, 2 incidents have happened. In state of Bihar, they wanted to hire our adjunct teachers, and they announced some 4,700 vacancies. 5 lakh people applied. 80% of them were either with BTech or MTech. And these were primary school teachers, the positions that were announced. And in the same year, UP Police has announced, I think for the job of messengers, some 60 odd jobs that vacancies that they've announced, and with a minimum qualification of 5th standard, and 27,000 postgraduates, 6,000 PhDs, and another 30,000 graduates applied for that job. Now, it's easy for us to say, what, they don't have employment, they don't have jobs. Frankly, I don't look at it that way. It's just that the degrees that they've earned are not worth the paper on which they are printed. There is no other reason for that to, for us to have a system that really produces this mass output, which is of very little relevance for either business or for employment or entrepreneurship. And I think if you look back and see, where is it that we have gone wrong historically? And therefore, what is it that the NEP is trying to correct? There are 2 phrases that really caught my eye in this entire document. And both phrases exist in the preamble of the document, or the introduction of the document. One is, it talks about achieving full human potential. And the other word is, phrase is, it is it is not important for students to learn, but for them to learn how to learn, right? And that's a point that Biju also in his speech he mentioned about that, and I think that's really what the focus of this entire document has been. If you look at the sustainability goal related to education, which is supposed to be achieved by 2030, was SDG 4, right? Where it essentially says that countries are expected to ensure inclusive and equitable, quality education and promote lifelong learning opportunities for all. That's exactly what the entire document really talks about. So there are 10 sub-goals that they've identified under SDG 4. This whole document really is framed around those 10 goals that we were supposed to achieve. We signed the document as India in 2015. That's when we committed that by 2030 we would implement this. So that's the relevance of the entire SDG 4 and what we are expected to do. Talking about the other aspect, which is about Indian culture, Indian ethos, and how does the NEP envisages that these be made part of the entire process. What I thought was that maybe I'll give you a small story. Recently, one of my relatives shared his experience with me. It's easy to learn through stories, and that's how I learn. That's how my learning happens. So he was traveling with his wife to a place called Rajahmundry in Andhra Pradesh, from his place. And, the train stops briefly in a station called Tuni, which is on the way. And, vendor approaches and coffee is offered, and he was just about to pay. And by the time the exchange happens, and, he only had 200 rupee note, and it cost 20 rupees, the coffee that they consumed. So the train was about to leave, and the vendor essentially jumps off the train and without paying the change, the remaining 180 rupees. So obviously, his wife looks at him and says, "Look, such a loser you are. You don't even know how to get 180 rupees back from a vendor. You ought to have taken the change before you exchange 200 rupee note," and so on and so forth, right? So for next 10 minutes, obviously, he had no responses to offer. And, lo and behold, I think about half an hour, by the time they get to the next station, a boy comes running towards them, 15-year-old boy. And he asked the question that, "Look, are you the one who consumed coffee but not received the change?" So he said, "Yes." "But why do you ask?" He said, "I brought your change." So he said, "But you're not the one who sold coffee to me." So he actually thought that maybe, somebody in the compartment would have seen his plight and just making it an offer to make it easy for him, right? So that his wife doesn't see him potentially as a loser. So he refuses to take the money. He said, "No, don't worry. I am the vendor's son who sold you that coffee. So, please take this money. Here is your change." So he gets completely pleased with that whole experience. And he says, "Look, I really want to talk to your father who gave you this kind of, value system for you to, get onto the train, follow me to the next station to give that change. And now you have to go back all the way because this is not your place of residence." So he says, "Look, he doesn't have a phone, but I have his phone, so you can talk to him." So he dials and gives him the phone, and the vendor is online. So he he thanks him. He thanked him for the gesture, and he says that, "Look, you must have received a very quality education. You must have been very highly educated. Must have received good education from your process." So the vendor says, "No, I'm only fifth passed, but I have read a lot of the stories of whether it's Vikram Vetal or Amar Chitrakada and whatever, the number of stories that really imbibe value systems in people." And he also said that, "Look, my 15-year-old son, who's now in 10th standard, I see him studying. I see him studying for his exams. But why is that nowadays nobody teaches?" And therefore, I was a little concerned. So I told both my sons they should be my runners. And it often happens in this station because train stops for a very few minutes here. And a lot of times it so happens that I am unable to return the change. So I use both my sons as runners to give change to people that I have not been able to give. And that way, at least they will learn what does it mean to be ethical, right? What does it mean to have value system in place? What does it mean to do business in a fair way, right? And, it was, of course, it was a small incident, but I just thought that, it rang so many bells in my head, right? And last time when we were all together, I spoke about my journey of in that education, my education and the journey. And I now, after I read this document, the NEP, this NEP is my primary school, right? And everything that's written in this NEP document is what I have been through as an individual. So for us now in 2020 to debate and try to, I'm so glad that I'm in this company of, such erudite people, and more importantly, open-minded people, because that's not what often I get in Delhi, right? The limitness of intellect often echoes in chambers, right? And that's what we go through. And people, they have religious connotations to this document. They have, some indoctrination, and I know this is the topics that we debate. Nobody's really looking at what's underlying anxiety that people have, and particularly those like Dr. Kasturi Rangan and other panel members. What is the anxiety that they have in just making sure that the next generations would receive what some of us may have been fortunate to have received. But I can tell you, at least in the last few generations, none of what I have been through that they're in a position to receive in the very school that I studied, right? In my most of my primary education happened with the recital of 1 hour long prayer to all gods under the sun, irrespective of which religion they belong to. All famous individuals, starting from Vivekananda to maybe Shushruta and crossing over Vivekananda to J.R.D. Tata in the modern times, right? And praying to all the rivers. And there was not a single day that passed without me reciting this shloka, which, it stuck to me for so long. It goes something like this: Bahirantascha bhutanam charam acharamevaja, right? Whenever I read that, I look at that and say, look, if you are religious, so basically what it means is that it says it exists outside and inside in all living beings, right? Those that are moving and those that are not moving. It is subtle and hence incomprehensible. It is very far, but yet near, right? Now, if you take that meaning of that shloka, if you are religious, you put God in that place, right? In that it. You see God in that, right? If you are a physicist, you put electron in it. That's electron. It's inside and it's outside. It's stationary and it moves. That's what we've learned. The whole uncertainty principle, and we gave Nobel awards, not only for the one who wrote uncertainty principle, but 3 others who subsequently told us electron is a wave, we gave Nobel. Electron is a particle, we gave Nobel. And 3rd person came in and said electron is a vehicle. We also gave Nobel for that individual. But we refused to look at the wisdom of 5,000 years, and we refused to recite that stanza, that poem. I think that is really, when I read this NEP as a document, that's the anxiety that I felt of those authors, desperate attempt to find a connection between what exists with us as, you may call it Indian thought, you may call Sanatana, whatever you may want to call it, doesn't matter, right? Something that existed for thousands of years, right? Nobody today in 2020 is talking about an era of, 60s era of rock and roll music, right? They're talking about Veda and yoga, which is 5,000 years ago. So that which is, sustainable and constant with us will find its own way of sort of coming in circles and in cycles with us. So I therefore see NEP as an opportunity for institutions like ours, right, to provide that window of opportunity. And I spoke about my primary school. The only reason why the primary school, it started with a prayer. We had the classes. A batch of 10 students used to arrive before the prayer because we had to clean our own school, right? You swept the school, you cleaned all the benches and tables. You studied in the same school, and evening we did after school we did gardening, right? And thereafter we went home. And by the end of it, by the time 5th standard, you had, people who knew some knew pottery, some knew gardening, some knew whatever, other trades that they could do. So I think somewhere, that kind of a flexibility is what NEP 2020 envisages. And therefore we have to look at each elements of those and see how we make changes within the construct of what is permitted. And we'll be able to build a generation of people, generation of students who will remain as a bridge between what existed in the past and what need to be transmitted into the future. So that is those are my 2 bits. Koshy, I know probably I've taken a minute or more. So handle back to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Guru. It's fantastic. It's sort of, the story is flowing very well among all of us. We have many more stories to go, because I always say all these are stories. If they cease to be stories, if they fail to be stories, then they don't make a difference and make an impact, and it is irrelevant, irrespective of whatever that we try to teach. And I'm very happy that we have many storytellers among us. And now it's time to get to the next story. Biju, you have to now share a different topic, is departure from marks-oriented assessment. I completely, this is a topic that is very close to my heart, because very often when we try to chase marks and indices and those kind of indicators, we often forget what is the underlying principle behind it. In fact, one of the worry, just taking a line from Guru, if you look at the NEP, is actually trying to express a philosophy and a thinking. And it will become truly successful if everybody who is responsible for implementing that and everybody who is responsible to track that will try to understand the underlying thought and philosophy and the angst of that the is trying to express. And if they end up interpreting in a very limited sense in its implementation and try to use the interpretation to push any kind of agenda, then it became a failure. So I hope that this ability to develop a deeper understanding of what is intended in education at every dimension, and that it is not just the mark. And I think that is something that we are trying to instill in at very, very young age. And I invite Biju to express his thoughts on this topic. Thank you, Biju. Over to you.
Yeah. Koshy, I think CP did mention that this whole document is not an easy document to implement. And if I had to take one point among all this, which might be the most difficult to implement, might actually be this, which is actually move from marks to what the document says is a deeper understanding of the subject. And in this particular case, I think the resistance is not going to again come from students. I think the resistance is not even going to come so much from teachers. They will have some resistance, which I'll speak about it. The resistance is going to come most from parents. I think one of the things I see in the document is that they do speak about parents. I think in this space, I think specifically the document brings in the role of parents, because I think as parents, I think we are used to a certain way of evaluating whether the school is good, my son is doing well, or my daughter is doing well enough. And suddenly you change that particular parameter and you introduce a new parameter. Since I work in the world of human behavior, I know one thing. You change the status quo, you will find your own reasons to say that why you shouldn't change. And I think, Thomas Kuhn in his famous book had clearly said that you can have paradigms and all that, but paradigms won't, even if you introduce a paradigm, the more intelligent you are, the more intelligent the reasons you will come as to say why you shouldn't change. And I'm sure this will be a topic where a lot of people are going to find their own excuses to still hold on to the marks as a basis. Now, to me, I might just look at two specific reasons as to I believe why we need to make this particular change. One is, there is this very interesting book written by this neuroscientist. He teaches in Columbia University, and he was taking a course in neuroscience out there. And he, as part of the course, there is a 1,200-page book on neurobiology, which is the students are supposed to learn. And what he found was that after the initial 1 year, 2 year of his course, the students had a feeling, neuroscience, sir, I know it. And he said, and as a neuroscientist, he said, I'm completely failing. He says, how can, even if the student has learned 1,200-page back to back, there's no way he can understand, even an iota of what, the brain is all about. And he realized he's actually getting it wrong. So he said, there is something wrong with me. And he went on to then develop a course called Ignorance in Columbia University. Because he said that, see, what is required for you to move forward is actually a feeling of ignorance. And he says, my students have started getting a feeling that I know everything. There's nothing more for me to learn more. And he's written a book called Ignorance, How It Drives Science, Stuart Feinstein. And therein he speaks about, for example, I know both CP and Guru spoke about the need for stories, but here he speaks about the importance of questions. And he also gives a very interesting anecdote of this very famous mathematician called David Hilbert, who actually in 1900, in one of those international conferences, he came up to the stage and he said, if you're a great mathematician, now solve any of these 20 problems. And he raised 20 significant problems in mathematics. And it seems in 2018, only 10 of those problems have actually been solved. But people who are in the world of mathematics and you say, I want to do something, they will actually go to David Hilbert's questions and say, can I do something to solve this particular problem? So he talks about the importance of questions. Now, what does marks do? For example, I'm in 8th standard. Suddenly I get 100 out of 100 in mathematics. Now, what is the indirect, this one that you're telling the kid? Yeah, you know it all. But, or it could be geography, it could be history, but you and I know that just getting 100 out of 100 in your 10th standard or even continuously from 5th standard to 12th standard in mathematics doesn't even allow you to give a feeling that you're even touching, in an iota of that big world called the world of mathematics and numbers. So I think it is important that we actually, along with, to me, this move is very important because once marks go away, then it's all the focus, as rightly the policy document also says, is going to be on analytical thinking and in understanding. How much do I understand? I think when the marks go away and then they say, oh, I don't really understand. Okay, and the teacher says, I have, sir, I have only 4 questions. Okay, let's discuss the questions. And if the students are able to come up with more and more interesting questions, that itself should be seen as a very significant facet that this kid has learned or this kid is learning. So to me, that is one very important facet. The whole role, how you generate questions, and if it was all about marks, that focus wouldn't have really been there. Second is, when I speak to college, even school students and college students, and, they always ask me, sir, which subject should I take? I don't know what to. And one of the things I ask them, tell them is, what are the subjects that you like? And then first I tell them, what are all the subjects you don't like? And then I ask them to drop it. And then they say, take the subjects that you like. And then I always tell them, take the subject that you like. And I know I come from Kerala, and I think there is a typical, I'm sure it's across India, typical questions that parents often ask is, which job has got high, good scope? Scope is like, high salaries. And I tell them, no, don't go for scope and salaries, but go for where your student is interested in. Because my belief is that if you're interested in something, you will slowly read a bit more about it. And as I said, you will also discuss more and more about that with your teachers. And that will slowly become your passion. And today I tell parents that if the student has realized or understood that this is my passion, that's enough, because he's on a path to success. And that leads to me, what I would call one of the most important facets of learning, which is lifelong learning, which again, the document briefly talks about. Because as corporate world, we know that today with technology and whatever sources of knowledge that we have are changing on a regular basis, we need to have people who are willing to learn even at the age of 55 and 60 and 65 on a regular basis. And how can that happen? Is they begin by saying, I don't know enough. So if you continue to give marks and marks becomes a parameter for, so that is never a motivator. As CP mentioned, neuroscience very clearly tells you that rewards are what keeps the brain moving. And marks, and more so when you get 100, there's nothing more to get. That's not a good reward. But I think the questions tends to create curiosity. And curiosity is always a driver of more learning. And also what happens as part of curiosity, you learn something, the dopamine gets released in your brain. And once there's a dopamine release, the brain wants to do that thing again and again. And that creating, that is what is more important. And I think once the mark system moves away, and I think we move on more into the world of understanding, developing the critical thinking, developing more and more questions about it, it creates lots of curiosity. It creates a lot of search. And in the when you get something is where the dopamine gets released. And then that becomes a habit, and that becomes a lifelong learning. So to me, this move, as I said in the beginning, is a very tough move to do. But I think most of there will be resistance from the parents. But I think this is definitely will help the students a lot. But again, let me come back to the teachers. It's again going to be tough for the teachers, because it was very easy for teachers to evaluate a paper. If it was, what was studied by heart, certain things, okay, it was so easy. I can, correct the papers in no time. Now, when some student is looking at that problem in this angle, someone is looking at it this particular angle, and someone else is raising certain other issues. Now, the whole judgment of correcting those papers or even teaching them how do you do that itself becomes very, very tough. So I know the teachers also are going to now, feel, hey, this is not easy. But I would always exhort the teachers who are listening in this conference to say, I think we need to find ways to do that. For example, I teach in some of the business schools. And right now, I have some papers to correct and the assignments to students have given. Because I've told them very clearly that there's no right answer. Basically, I've asked them, how would you have managed the COVID situation differently? And now that you listen to my lectures on human behavior, and how will you do it differently? Each student has looked at it in a different angle. But I realize that each assignment now takes me about 10 to 15 minutes to correct it. And at the same time, there have to be some marks or some judgment had to be done. It takes me a long time to evaluate. But then that will be some of the responsibilities that we will have to take. So overall, just to sum it up, it is a brilliant move. It will really help lifelong learning to happen. It will really happen because of this particular move. But there will be resistance from parents, and there will be a little worry from the teachers too. But I think once we move from the marks to this, that will be one of the most significant changes we can make in the way education has been happening in this particular country. Thank you.
Thank you, Biju. You have very nicely articulated how we have to look differently, or why and how we should look differently on the whole process of imparting education and acquiring education. And we have been going, as I was experiencing and sharing earlier, we have been going nicely across the various dimensions of building this NEP. So now it is, I would like to touch upon one session. This is competency-based learning. So in this one, while I have sort of such eminent panelists who are telling the big picture stories of the impact and implications of this, I thought I will take this, and I expect something like that to come up after my sessions too. So what I thought, I will take a little time to share with my colleagues here, going a little more specifics onto their day-to-day life and how it is going to change. Because what happens is that I have been involved in a number of transformatory ideas, in implementing that. What happens is there will be somebody who have got through, somebody will create a policy, somebody will start announcing, But if you really look at a lot of people for whom this is going to impact, very often do not start thinking. So they think, it has to come sometime. Okay, let me see it then, because I am worried about what is urgent, not what is important. It's a very cliched saying in the management books. Unfortunately, that is something that is never appreciated by a lot of people. And often the highest amount of attention is given to what is urgent. Sometimes it's not even important. And unfortunately, our educational system, like what you said about giving marks, and worse in our corporate system, where at least 20% of the colleagues or senior executives spends in creating charts and graphs and trackings and stuff, which have absolutely no relevance to the whole business that is they're involved in, or in a direct relevance, or it has a lot of apparent relevance, not direct relevance. That's unfortunately the way that we go about. And probably I hope that over the period of maybe 20-30 years, by the time we are no more here, and if this philosophy is pushed towards, I hope that we will be able to bring about that culture, not just in education, but also in in the way that education is imbibed by the students, and it becomes like a significant cultural change in the way they approach society. So here, I want to just pick up one interesting comment that one was shared with me long ago. So this was when we were talking about job opportunities in India. So he, this gentleman made a very interesting remark. He said, we don't have unemployment in this country. We have unemployables. This is what Guru was also saying some time ago when he was talking about the number of people who are appearing for interview and their qualifications. Because we have given a lot of, they've given a degree, they have attended the exam, they don't have the skills or the competencies, and that is given the last attention. Okay, so that is the whole spirit of competency-based learning that we are trying to bring about. Okay, it is going to help the whole education system to bring a focus on what kind of competency is being built. What in each of the session, each of the class, what outcome is expected? How is that outcome articulated and imbibed by the teacher? And how that teacher shares that that particular competency and ensure that at the end of that teaching there is an outcome that is there of, even if I just take a simple example. So I said I'm going to go to the nuts and bolts for my fellow teachers. We teach our students addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. Sometimes, very often, the problems that is given, probably copied from some textbook, don't even have any context to their day-to-day life. Whereas if the other day I saw some question that was being prepared, it was giving the question had it was about how many light bulbs that you have at home. They assume that you have 10 light bulbs, 7 fans, 1 refrigerator, and 2 heaters, and they also given how much is the energy consumption by each of them. Somebody has to read, understand, and multiply and find out total units that is there, and what is a unit price, what's the value. It is nothing but addition, subtraction, addition, multiplication, and the most important thing, it teaches 2 more things. It helps you to contextualize for your life, for your day-to-day problem. Second, it also brings you the awareness of how to balance your budget. It sort of gives some signals on the kind of energy that is getting spent, used. These things will start tickling. So that is why the multidisciplinary approach comes. So that is why there's a lot of focus that we are talking about competency-based learning that we are trying to bring about. It's not an easy journey. So let's go down to something specific. So what does it mean? If you look at competency, if I just take a theoretical thing, what is it? It's about skills, abilities, and knowledge, which we understand well, that helps us to perform a given task. So every time when we teach a competency, an outcome, you should be able to say, how can it help him to solve a problem or to do a given task? And that is what is expected by competency-based learning. So it is going to significantly change the various dimensions of the way education is done. If you look at the curriculum, okay, so as you probably would have seen in the NEP, it says that pedagogy to be completely transformed, to be transformed by 2022 to bring 4 important dimensions. One, we need to identify in our curriculum what are the core essentials. What are the core essentials that we are trying to come out of this set of topics that is being considered. And that core essentials, is it expected to be memorized, mugged up, reproduced and forgotten, or there it is absorbed with significant critical thinking? And that is possible only if we are sort of try to inculcate in them a discipline of thinking clearly. That triggers thinking and not memorizing. And I'm not an expert in neuroscience. I'm sure Biju would sort of give more theoretical foundation to that. Thinking is very different from memorizing. One, if I use the computer knowledge, one is using of my CPU, other is using of my storage. Both are important. But if you are simply a repository of storage with no ability to retrieve and apply that for your daily task, then that storage is of complete waste. It's like a hard disk with a lot of information which is just lying there without a CPU to process it and a display to show it. Then even those things are possible only if the teachers go beyond just giving lectures. How are we involving those in activities that will trigger a thinking and make them use materials or ideas? It has to bring in a mechanism that in every class, every session, there should be number of breaks compulsory, which will force certain activity from our students. It could be us probably the student explaining, narrating a poetry and explaining what it means based on his understanding than just teacher giving him a set of very erudite explanation of philosophy of that. As somebody else said earlier, when a story or a poem, something is being presented to a student, based on the context when they come, it is like they look at it with different filtered glass. The filter of the color filter I use could be very different the color filter that is used by Guru, and very different from the color filter used by Biju. And all of them looking at the same poetry, same story, same content, but they all will see them in a completely different fashion. And when there is an activity, when there is a method of providing activity in the class that brings about these different filters, and eventually people will learn to synthesize these multiple filters and take a larger story. It is like I remember somebody explaining the philosophy, the spirit of 33 crores of gods in the way the Indian Hindu philosophy says. Somebody explained very beautifully. He says that is it was not saying that there are like gods dimes a dozen. It had a different meaning. What it meant is he was expressing the multi-faceted personality of God that is beyond our understanding. Now, God is something beyond our human capability to understand. It is like diamond with so many cuts, so many faces together, giving it the wholeness of the diamond. And to make us understand, somebody sat down and created each of that facet a picture of a God. Okay. Essentially, the idea was not to say that you is your God versus my God. It was about to say that God's infinite capability and synthesize that big picture. So I'm not going to religious inculcation here. I'm trying to tell you the philosophy of our ability to see each element, each story, each facet, each things what you think is fact, look from different dimensions to understand its meaning and inculcate. And our teaching process has to bring these things as a part of this. All these things possible only if there is interaction. And that will lead to what you call experiential learning in the next level, where they are asked to apply whatever the small competencies to do a holistic project and experience that, the whole learning of the topic. These are the kind of, the expectation. So that's why the NEP says the focus should be learning outcome, competencies, and subject integration. Unfortunately, most of our education system is teaching some subjects. Earlier, Guru was saying, everything is a subject. Even Tamil is a subject. And I'm not going into the nuances of the word there, but the spirit of what it is. When you simply look at something as picking up some subject, we fail to understand what is a competency that we are building and what is the outcome of each of the elements that we are learning. Okay, so that's why it is not about memorizing just facts, figures, but what it means in our life, our profession, and as members of the society. It also expects that this will help us to become independent, self-reliant, and a lifelong learner. Because I began by saying that the learning is what, education is what has stayed back in our brain after we forgot everything what you learned in our schools and colleges. I use the word learning in a very limited sense, in the sense what we memorize, because that's a way that we have been taught in school. But the true learning of learning is how it has changed, and that change is not a static thing. That change will, if it has become a static thing, then over a period of time we all end up becoming dinosaurs. Unfortunately, many of our corporate system as well as the government bureaucracy, encourage that kind of deep freeze in our thinking. I say that it is almost like rigor mortis. It is just frozen, because we have developed a mindset. If you got 100% in maths up to BSc maths, he should be the cat in maths, but he is not just. He has only catch the beginning. If he has passed his engineering from IIT, he should be the top brain. He should be able to solve all problems. If he has qualified in IAS, and he should be the only one who knows all answers to the question. He should just sit down and dictate, thou shalt do this, thou shalt do that. And that kind of a mindset is not what is, that kind of mindset is completely counterproductive. Unless there is a spirit of lifelong learning comes in, and that, the society will not progress. And these things are certain habits and attitudes that has to be built in when you are young. I was just remembering the story Guru was talking about. The tea seller taught his son. By making him go and give that change back, he was talking. He was building a foundation of ethical business. And that is to be set when you are really young. Then it is going to change the pedagogy. So it is not, there is, the NEP expect there is no hard separation between curricular, co-curricular, and extracurricular activities. It has to be built in as a holistic, education. So the way that we, program, our, classes, exams, everything has to change. In fact, today morning, Liz and I was having a discussion about, the extent to which the additional skills and vocational skills can be accommodated in the class 10th. So we were saying that if you look at the current way of education, whether it is class 10th and 12th, the way it says, they have no time. You ask the teacher, ask the principal, ask the student, ask the parent, they have no time. They should stop all their extracurricular activities because they have to prepare for the board exam. Forget about their art classes, philosophy classes, language classes. Just help them to mug up, memorize the kunji or the guide that is being given so that they can get the mark. And unfortunately, the way that we are creating mark is somebody who, you have the top 25%, everybody will get 100. So there's no difference between extra effort there. Even the guy who has picked up to write 2 sentences will, mostly pass the exam. Even the differentiation that rewarding mechanism itself is gone. So, in terms of in their mind. But, so if that is because that's a way that, you can't blame. It is not that we don't appreciate, but that's a way that we are expected to behave. So from this context, even the assessment will have to change. It will become a continuous tracking of the learning outcome of each child. Even the the board exam which will undergo a change. It will become assessment of essential skills. As teachers and as educational institutions, we'll have to start appreciating what it means and learn the impact of it and be ready for that. I'm just sharing again. My colleagues are here in MJC. Just sharing our story among us. We try to introduce the idea of digital education, digital literacy since 2015, and all of us to some extent, were giving TK, it has to be done. That's not, but that is all for somewhere else. Maybe in US, maybe in Delhi, maybe for the privileged class. But not for passing, not for our, our current syllabus. That's the way they used to do. It is not because we are incapable. It is because we could never understand the importance of the and appreciating and how the world is going to change. But when the COVID hit, suddenly it stuck upon. Many of this foundation really helped. But in the last 4 or 5 months, the changes that had happened among all of us sitting around here, in from campus, has been humongous. Today, last week they conducted I participated in the Teachers Day program, which is purely digital, with children, somebody dancing from the terrace, somebody creating another Bharatanatyam from their garden, not even garden, from somewhere far away into the agricultural land, Because it is to them. It is brought out the opportunities. It gave them a completely different way of approach. So that's the reason I'm saying is that the NEP may come only 2020, the full thing may be only 2030. But unless we start thinking about and preparing and saying that these are important thinking changes that need to happen, we will not be ready by then. We cannot. This is because our education system expects that if I sit down and mug up in the previous night, that is good enough. I'll get 100 out of 100. Why should I absorb the learning? Why should I understand the meaning? Why should I understand how it affects my life? How should I understand how it solves the problem? I know these are three questions, 3 definitions, 5 long answer, 7 formulas. That will happen. We are very we are very outcome oriented. What is outcome? Outcome is 100 out of 100. Not what has stayed back, what is learned. Okay, so now the NEP expects that the assessment is going to include core concepts. There will be breakage of core concepts, higher order learning, and what are the foundational skill that is going to do. And we are going to see and encourage significant use of artificial intelligence and digital tools to enable that. To help us in that. One of the especially with this COVID environment, the digital literacy that is pushing further by the government includes the ultimate of the teaching mechanism, which is imparting personalized teaching. Understand how Koshy is learning, how Koshy is progressing in his building up its competency in maths and English and each of them, and help him and sort of use digital tools to figure out how he's coping up and suggest him the right kind of aids and give him the right reports on progress to him, to his parents, to his teachers, so that the competency building is more personalized. And eventually, I hope it will lead to encouraging person to develop competencies where he is naturally strong at and capable, and these digital tools helping to sort of build on that. So the whole progress card also is going to undergo a change. It is going to show not just on whether you got 100 out of 100 in maths. It is going to sort of refer in our progress on cognitive, affective, socio-emotional, and psychomotor skills being developed, and its progress on that. So it is all about helping to and it is also help to help the students to proceed after building each competency. Proceed further, how to go next stage, based on the level in which he is, the pace on which I study, and how I study math will be very different from the pace at which Liz might study or Biju might study. whereas the pace at which I study art will be very different from the pace at which my daughter would study. So it has to meet with our our own capabilities and our own comfort level. And so this is the whole the spirit of NEP is, like Guru explained earlier, is to understand this the whole changes that is going to happen, philosophical change that's going to happen. And we as the student, we are among the teachers of a MJC education institution, which is school, college and teacher education institute. So we all have to start thinking about it, understanding it, bring it back, and practice and start practicing that, so that we can become a good reference sample for our community. And I think that is going to be the biggest contribution we as collective team can do. And this is what I wanted to share with you on my thought on competency-based learning. Now I will invite Raj to talk on a topic of how to integrate vocational education in the middle and secondary school. Welcome, Raj.
Thank you, Koshy, and thanks to you and Liz for this opportunity to introduce this topic of vocational education in the school curriculum. I have been an ex-consultant myself, so I cannot function without PowerPoint. So I'm going to share my screen, if you don't mind here, okay? Is it visible, the screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I think, and I'm really glad that MJC has taken the lead to organize this sort of, online consultation, because I think MJC actually encompasses almost like the Indian education system in itself, on its campus, with the primary, secondary, college, a B.Ed and a B.Ed college, and then, even having arts and science as well as residential, day scholars. So I think it can be almost like a experimental ground to implement NEP itself on the campus in entirety. So very, very happy to contribute here. So I think many of us spoke about assessment, and this is what happens when even a lower KG baby is also afraid of exam results coming out, and that is what is happening here, right, in this whole process. Now, if I speak about vocational education on this current picture, I'm on slide number 3 now. You are seeing Javed Habib, Vikas Khanna, and Manish Malhotra. And what is common between these people, if you look at it, from that point of view? One is a hairdresser, there's a master chef, third is a fashion designer. Mr. Javed Habib started as a barber, before he became a hairdresser. He started learning cutting hair when he was 16 years old. And then Mr. Vikas Khanna started, he was a cook before he became a master chef, and he actually started learning cooking when he was 14 years old, and he used to serve food to his mom's, kitty parties. Actually, that is where his liking for the food started. And Mr. Manish Malhotra was a tailor before he became a fashion designer, and he started tailoring when he was 21 years old in the college. So I think the common, this thing about it, common thread amongst all these 3 people who are, such a iconic brands now, is that they started doing things in their young age, and that is what gave them such a passion to develop their skill and being what they are today. And now, so that means that how do you do it in practice? What they have been able to do in a one-off manner, and we don't leave it to to chance here. So NEP says about vocational. The word vocation appears 76 times in the policy. Emphasis is on multidisciplinary and holistic learning, and the learning should be enjoyable, engaging, and integrated. So that is sort of highlight from it, and no hard separation. And we already spoken about this clauses here as well. And what I'm going to talk about, typically in fashion of the learning by doing, that there is a multi-skill foundation course and some examples which can allow you to illustrate this, how this can be done. Here, the students are learning food processing and cooking as part of the curriculum. This is in 9th and 10th grade. They are learning gardening. They are learning, organic pesticide making as well. They are learning electrical and electronics. I'm on slide 14, by the way. They are learning electrical wiring, And they're also learning bamboo work and finishing, because the school where the area is, there is a lot of bamboo which is grown. They're also learning woodwork. They're also learning operating, drilling machine. Here, they are learning basics of health and hygiene, as well, and how to measure blood pressure. They're also learning how to construct a shed net as part of the nursery curriculum. And they are looking at tool identification, introduction to two-wheeler, actually opening of a two-wheeler here, and a garden which is there on the terrace. And you can see here that this high school girl is operating a benchwise here, and also looking at the model drilling machine here, apart from the grinder here. So this is sort of a multi-skill foundation lab which is there in the school in the 9th and 10th grade. Now, apart from, so I'm just quickly going through these pictures now of this lab here. So what does NEP say? NEP has an emphasis on conceptual understanding rather than rote learning and learning for the exams. And that's why in such courses, it is 80% time is spent on actually performing practicals, and 20% is a theory behind the practicals, what you are doing in this time. So for example, if you are looking at what is blood pressure, right? I mean, we all know high BP, low BP and all that, but hardly we know what does it actually mean, what is a high BP, what is a low BP. If we know that low BP is 80 and 120 is a high BP on a higher range and other things, that will help you in life, right? And that is what will make it really practical for you. And if you know how to measure it, how to interpret that result, that will carry you through the lifelong learning. Here, the students have done drip irrigation system. What does it do? You're looking at force of gravity. You are looking at estimating, volume of water required. You're also determining length of pipe and where to fit the outlets, is the bill of material, teamwork, and above everything, it is learning by doing, right? Whether you're figuring out how to create a model of drip irrigation system. Now, in this particular example, we asked our students to draw a floor plan of their home, in that. So this is a one-room, kitchen kind of a home in which our students are living. So she's the one who has drawn up this plan. And I think, it will make any architect proud, actually, what is here, which involves, high level of visualization, measurement, proportion, and of course, basics of engineering drawing as well. And this is a 9th grade student that we are talking about. Or now many of us, learned the, Pythagoras theorem and laws of motion, but I'm not sure when did we apply that last, right? In this case. So in this particular case, when you are constructing a ramp, you are applying a Pythagoras theorem that, what should be the slope, what should be the length, what should be at what level or at what slope you want to go the ramp to go down, right? So learning and vocational skills, many times, vocational education is known only as a trade skills, in terms of that it is only for the hard skills, it is only about technical skills and other things too. But it is important, it is equally about life skills as well, especially in the secondary, high secondary schools that we are looking at. Here you can see that there is a teamwork, right? I mean, these people are, I think, making some sort of jam, something and there's a school in Sikkim where the boys and girls are working together. They are figuring out who will do what, and then preparing the food product here. Or we are also removing gender bias here. The boy is cooking, the girl is doing the soldering and wire cutting here as well, which cannot be taught, just like that in theory. But by doing this, we are removing those such kind of gender bias as well. Or dignity of labor. We all spoke about that, the story about the tea seller, a son going behind to return the change. Similarly, there is nothing wrong if in the school you are cleaning something, you are cleaning the gas cylinder here or the gas burner, and there is nothing wrong about you doing that as part of the curriculum itself, right? And resilience. I mean, we also speak about doing more with less. Now, in this particular example, this is a school in Gujarat where the students are repairing the school benches, actually, because the broken benches they are repairing. And what this will do is that they'll actually never break one anymore, right? Because they're already repairing something which they are going to sit on and feel that kind of belonging towards that. This is a kind of workshop setup which is there as well. The carpentry tools and food processing tools, and there's a basic healthcare tools here as well, which you can see the measuring tools as well. I think many times if you ask me how long is 1 meter versus how long is 1 foot, versus how much an area of 1 acre is, many times I'll be lost, right? Even though I'm an engineer. So this is what we are trying to address here, to have this commonsensical knowledge with our students, right? Of course, the safety is also taken care of in this whole process too, to how does one go that. And vertical mobility, do such kind of, everybody learns everything during 9th and 10th grade. And in the 11th and 12th, you can specialize in one of the areas, like right from healthcare, food processing, beauty and wellness, gardening, agriculture, and other things too, right? So this is something which allows you to choose your, passion as well. And it's almost like a career guidance or career counseling in a very, very practical, practical way. NEP 2020 also talks about curtailing dropout rates and ensuring universal access to education at levels. We have been doing this in Maharashtra, and we have seen that there are 3 times more self-employed people, 1/3 unemployment rate, a much higher rate of continuing higher education as well, when the student is undergoing vocational education in grade 9th and 10th. And these are some more, it has also led to increase in the school enrollment. In Maharashtra and other places where the the vernacular schools, Marathi and other medium schools, were losing students. Whereas in this case, they were able to gain students by offering the skill education as well. So increasing school attendance, improved standardized scores. Now, internship, and this is a topic very close to my heart. And actually, I'm a son of a small grocery merchant. My father ran a grocery shop for 50 years, and I was an intern to him since I was 9 years old. Since I was in grade 3. And I used to sweep the floor, I used to manage cash, I used to manage customers, I'll go to the wholesale market to buy the goods and material and place the order for that as well, right? So that is what, and I think what it taught me was unbelievable. Later on during my engineering, when I was studying engineering, I also sold life insurance policies. And what I learned by selling life insurance policies was much more than what engineering can ever could teach me at the time. So now we have made it as a part of the curriculum. In 11th and 12th grade, our students are, working with a small and micro enterprise near their school or near their home, and learning the tricks of the trade. They can work in auto mechanic shop, they can work in gardening and nursery supply, a food processing unit, an engineering workshop, a primary healthcare center, a retail shop, whatever. I think learning can happen anywhere. It may not be in the school itself. And these are some of the pictures, and this is also breaking gender barriers. This was the only girl on the shop floor in that entire this thing. It is auto component manufacturing unit, in Pune, and now she has become a CNC machine operator by the way, here. And this girl is working with a food processing, a coffee shop here. Here, this person is working on the whole lathe and CNC machine and gardening supplies and PMC gardens as well, right? What is the current status of vocational education in the country? So multi-skill foundation course is now being offered. It's recognized as a national skill qualification framework compliant level 2. It's a 100-mark subject, and it is also approved by CBSE now, being introduced in 18 states, including 700 plus schools, including Tamil Nadu as well, actually, and 60 plus CBSE schools, and 50,000 students are part of it. That is one part. Secondly, Ministry of Education has launched a scheme of vocationalization of school education, through which there is one subject, 100-mark subject, and there are 10,000 schools across India, including 105 in Tamil Nadu, which are having vocational education as part of the curriculum from 9th to 12th grade. And there are almost 1 million students who are part of this curriculum, who are part of this scheme as well from Ministry of Education. So this is the current status, and I think now it is very rare that policy as well as private sector as well as civil society, all three coming together to implement something. It very rarely happens. So we are very glad that we are part of this, and we are talking to MJC as well about our partnership and looking forward to do more. So thanks again.
Thanks, Raj. That was, again, going much to the nuts and bolts and see how those nuts and bolts can, and sharing how these nuts and bolts can, complement the learning and make it more holistic. So it's time for Guru to come back again to discuss and share his thoughts on teachers' continuous learning through likes of NETF. Welcome, Guru. Over to you.
Thank you, Koshy. Thank you, Raj, for that session. And this is just a continuation of what I think in the second segment, both Biju, Koshy, and Raj have essentially spoken about. If I come across a little critical or cynical in this section, I really want everybody to recognize this is only out of love and affection, but not denigrating anybody or any profession. Particularly the teaching community. My father has been a teacher for over 36 years. Of course, he retired in early 2000s, and I have deepest respect for teaching community. Having said that, there is much that needs reform in that segment, and that's why I made that request. And please don't, if things are a little critical, so then please don't take it to heart. Before I move into the continuous learning for teachers, which is a major part of this policy, and I'll talk about why it is so important for us. And I thought maybe just to light up the scene, I'll share another story with you. Again, this is a story from a colleague of my father. In the days when he was in service. So this colleague of my father used to teach in a village which was near to our village, but much deeper inside in the jungle parts of the country. And I've never seen him visit his school, go to his school, and he always used to. He lived in the same village, so I know about that. And here, my father used to go to school every day, 8 in the morning, come back at 4 o'clock. And from 6 onwards, he would, 5 onwards, he would again start his sessions, continuously teaching children, or, with the private lessons, for no fee, and just to make sure that they're all caught up with the curriculum. Now, net, I used to see my father was like struggling through, 11 hours, 12 hours a day. And then this man, who barely visited school. So I was very curious. And once I asked him, what's the secret? So he said, and of course, this was the time when the Inspector Raj was full in force, which it is still. So you have the Department of Education, district education inspectors who would go around. So his trick was that, he had, I think, 10 or 12 students in the school. So he would, so he said, look, I taught them, my teaching starts with telling them how many days are there in a week, and how, what is the name of the day, of every day in a week. So he said, I always used to teach them that there is Sunday, Sunday, and Sunday, 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 and Sunday. There are 7 days in a week, right? Every day is a Sunday. And I said, but why would you do that? So he said, look, when this inspector goes to the school, naturally he will ask the students that, look, has the teacher been coming? They say, no, because I never go to school. And then the inspector would ask the children, look, when did he not come to the school? They would say, Sunday he did not come to the school. Right? So then the inspector would say, okay, so Sunday is a holiday anyway. So these, children are stupid fellows. So they're just complaining about their teacher. And then he would write a good report and go back to it, right? Now, I know, I just wanted to share that as an example. So here is a man who potentially has not learned anything, according to me, other than playing cards probably, for well over 30 years, right? But he remained in the profession, in a noble profession called teaching. The fear that I have about NEP 2020, that it may not see the light of the day, is possibly not for the reasons that Biju spoke about, which is resistance from parents. Of course, there will be resistance from parents, but that's manageable. The resistance for implementation of NEP, against implementation of NEP, is likely to come from only one and only one quarter, which is the teaching community. The success of NEP depends on the reform that we are able to bring about in the teaching community particularly focusing on their entry-level qualifications and the upkeep of their learning cycle throughout their tenures. In fact, there are two words that are introduced here, which is tenure time and tenure. So tenure time is the probation before a teacher or a lecturer or a professor gets confirmed into a tenure. Of course, it's not going to happen from tomorrow. The implementation of it will begin from 2030. There is a long leeway that's provided in terms of accommodating all the people that we have currently in the system who may not necessarily have the kind of qualifications that are expected from people to have. So after my careful reading through and understanding all the frameworks that they proposed, and also the institutions that they have introduced, who will be responsible for providing this continuous education for teachers, my summary conclusion, and therefore the message to all the teacher community that we have on the call, is that if you do not have passion, if you do not have aptitude for teaching, my suggestion is that you have 9 years to look for another job, right? I don't think from 2030, I mean, again, as I said, it all depends on how the teacher community takes it, and particularly the teachers union in the government schools and public institutions. Majority of the resistance may come from there. But if I were to step back a bit and then talk about, let me take this whole pressure of being compliant to something that's said, right? If I were to look at the merits of what has been stated, I don't think, historically we talk about 68 education reform that happened, and I think 86 happened, 96 happened, I think 92 happened, and I was hoping that the next reform will only happen in 29, because we seem to having 68, 96 and 68 and 86, and then 92 and possibly 29, but thankfully it happened in 2019, maybe 10 years ahead of it, but of course the implementation is only going to happen by 2030. If I were to look at the earlier ones, the focus was largely on access and infrastructure. None of those policies really addressed the need for continuous learning of teachers. This policy is pivoted on the continuous learning of teachers. If that does not happen, this policy is very unlikely to succeed. Just imagine a scenario where we are essentially dismantling all the known notions, the way how education is imparted in the country, which is 10 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4, 10 plus 2 plus 3, or 10 plus 2 plus 4, whichever way, depending on the faculty that you choose to study. We are essentially dismantling that, right? We are essentially saying, I'm always inspired by this writer called Paul Kalanidhi, who wrote the book, When the Breath Becomes Air, right? Now, he was a graduate and postgraduate in English literature. And, he was about to go to Stanford for his PhD in English literature. And then he decides that he wanted to do medical sciences. And then he completes his graduation in applied medical sciences. And then he goes to Cambridge and specializes in neuroscience. And that's how he became a doctor. Can you imagine in India, we having to think that a postgraduate in English literature becoming a neurosurgeon? Not possible, right? Now, that's the paradigm that we are now wanting to invite. Now, if we do not have a robust teaching mechanism, we will neither be here nor be there. We will have a chaotic generation of people who are neither good for multidisciplinary programs nor for unidisciplinary studies that they're known for. So therefore, coming back to my point, I think if there is one thing that's extremely important for us as MJC, I'm sure, I think Raj mentioned that MJC in some sense is a pilot case for implementing NEP. I fully agree with him. I think, we are probably best positioned because we have that little bit of autonomy where pedagogy can be decided, vocational education can be experimented, and all aspects of multidisciplinary can be tried, including the B.Ed colleges that you have. In future, post 2030, it is unlikely that we'll see unipolar discipline B.Ed colleges, right? You have to have you may offer those 1 or 2 years B.Ed programs that they're talking about in the same campus, but you can no longer have a 4-year B.Ed without having multidisciplinary on campus. So that's the fundamental change that we're going to experience on MJC. And my sense is that I think all the guidance that is provided with respect to continuous education, and mind you, it's not very difficult. It's just about, on the credit regime, they're talking about earning 50 additional credits, right? That will enable you to get to the next level. They're talking about promotions. Of course, it may be more applicable for a large government institution and universities. But again, the ethos is that they are saying that, look, if you have taught for 20, 30 years, and if you have lost interest in it, and if you want to be an administrator, we will show a path for you. Provided, if you continue to accrue your credits, and if you continue to clear the teacher, that entrance, the teaching tests that are expected to, that they're expected to pass at various grades, from primary to the university, across the regime, that we have now a strong testing process that's put in place. The third and the most important point, according to me, is that there is also a mention of providing facilities that are necessary for teachers to, imbibe this continuous learning as a behavior, right? So they're talking about access to multi-skilled institutions that are set up by the government. They also opened up the regime where we can bring in local experts, seniors that we have within community, and bring them as master trainers that one can facilitate in terms of providing that continuous input to teachers. So I think we still have, I guess, having said all of this, I still will wait and see how this aspect is going to be taken by the teaching community. Again, as I said, the warning is that if that community doesn't scale up and stand to the challenge of NEP 2020, we would be essentially muddying the waters without knowing what we are really getting into. And that's how critical it is. And luckily, there is a lot of time that's available from now till 2030. And an institution like ours can readily experiment. I'm sure, we already have a strong learning curriculum in place for our teachers. But I think this will give us another impetus to look at sort of upscaling, that whole aspect of it. But without that, as I said, it's very difficult for us to succeed in implementing this part of it. And I'd like to end by stating that, as they say, knowledge doesn't improve by repeating known things, right? Ratio is for how and how much, but it never answers the question why. And what is important for us now is to set up those facilities where our teachers can go there and learn newer methods. I think, Koshy, you spoke about it. Giving the same example of a boy standing in a railway station, and if the train goes by at 60 kilometers speed, the same question that we have right now. Who's standing next to a train today? Nobody's standing next to a train. Maybe it's time that we invent newer examples. I've had a drama teacher who used to come in the makeup of the character that he was going to teach, right? And I never understood how a drama teacher can come in a pant and a shirt and teach how Duryodhan looked. It's just not possible. I used to have a physical education teacher. He never wore PT shoes, right? So I think, we just have to get out of these kind of practices that probably have worked, I think, for all this while. And I have deepest respect and hope on teaching community that they will imbibe the newer methods. And as I said, I'm happy to contribute and see how the changes needs to be brought in a limited way on our campus, which is, a good test case for us for NEP 2020. Over to you, Koshy.
Thank you, Guru. I think this is a kind of reality check that we all have to go, take ourselves. And like I was saying earlier, unless we understand this important dimension and start preparing that for, we will not be ready when the time when the change is needed. So now we have Vish coming back again to give his thoughts on spotlight on the ECC element where the substantial change is proposed. I'm sort of requesting Vish to take it from here.
Yeah, so I'm going to start off with a challenge to Mr. Biju Dominic, in the sense that from an ECC standpoint and from the standpoint of what Guru Baladi said, how do we get all the students in MJC college to aspire to become a kindergarten teacher. Because in the hierarchy of how we have established ECCE, if we look at how the education system functions, the kindergarten teacher can be anybody and needs to have only 1 year degree, even from an official standpoint. Whereas if you are taking it to the higher levels, you obviously need to be more specialized, and the assumption is that the learning needs to be much deeper if you have to teach physics in 9th standard. But anybody can teach a kindergarten class, anything. And the salary structure also, the way that it is, set up, is the fact that typically the 9th, 10th, the teachers who are actually delivering the marks at those critical points of 10th and 12th are the ones who command huge salaries. The kindergarten teacher will be, if you are not there, I'll find somebody else to replace you, is the approach that we take. So from the standpoint of what Guru said and what Biju's specialization is, and also to Liz and Koshy, this is a challenge that we have to say that I need my best teachers in kindergarten, and yet I don't think that it is worthy of adequate attention. And in fact, I don't think that you need a B.Ed degree, or most students who come to a B.Ed college typically will not aspire to become a kindergarten teacher. They would go to the, there's one more degree, I forget the name of it, the diploma in early learning or something. That is a 1 year degree, which is what they will do. So I think all of us cumulatively, when we think about ECCE, and the NEP actually brings that into very sharp perspective, because so far the kindergarten years, or currently the way that it is structured, is that the foundational years are identified as 3 to 8, which means that you have the 3 to 6 and then you have the 6 to 8. And there is once again a very strong, let us say, scientific perspective, because this has been one of those weird things that is there around the world, not only in India. It's that somewhere I feel that class 1 or grade 1 onwards is when I can be taught in a particular way, and before that I have this kindergarten section. But anybody, once again, with a little bit of an understanding of neuroscience will recognize the fact that 3 to 8 is actually, or 0 to 8, is actually a much more integrated space of learning, where the design of teaching, the design of learning basically need to flow very nicely from one stage to the next stage. And so I think it is a very strong statement made in the NEP, which says that it is 5 plus 3 plus 3 plus 4. The way that they have actually distributed the school years. That 5 actually changes a lot of things. The thing that they left untouched, unfortunately, and I hope that somebody, the pressure that many people will bring on and they will change it, is that they still left the Anganwadi to the health ministry or the women and child welfare, that department, and they gave the older classes to the education ministry. Actually, as far as education is concerned, I think it should all come into an integrated space. And I think ministries don't know how to coordinate with each other and create anything integrated. And as it is, there are enough challenges. So we would need to look at how that unit is going to work like a single unit. So I am, of course, thrilled about the fact, and all of us, I think, must be thrilled about the fact that we recognize this 3 to 8 age category. And very importantly, we recognize the 3 category, because as much as one would like to wish that the home must be the best learning environment, the reality, whether we look at it, is in the most underprivileged segments of society, where actually the parent does not have time. There's this misunderstanding that the parents there have the time and resources to actually support their children. They actually do not have time. If you travel into the village areas, the rural areas of India, you will find that they are working and the children are just out there. It is not as if there is no learning happening, but bringing this pre-kindergarten year into the formal space is what, once again, ECC has done, because it has said that it'll be 3, it'll be what we currently call pre-kindergarten, lower kindergarten, upper kindergarten, first and second, that they have actually taken into a single module. So there is a lot of one possibility. There are also an equal number of challenges, and this is where so many things are going to get shaped, and this also, has its echo in the way you assess, because this is probably a space where assessment must be completely thrown out of the window, and we simply say that I am going to provide you the best possible experiences. I'm going to provide you the best possible exposure to learning, and I'm going to allow you to discover. I'm not going to measure how much of what I have given you have absorbed, what of it you have absorbed, what of it you have not absorbed. The onus is entirely on me, the teacher, to show that I can, provide a rich learning, rich and joyful learning environment in these early ages. And this is a space where I think, once again, from an MJC perspective, that we really need to look at how much of my MEd is actually focused on some of these ideas. How much do I actually look at what is discovery-based learning, what is activity-based learning, what lessons are there from a Montessori system, for example. How can I actually make this scalable? How can I make this actually inclusive such that it doesn't become an elitist, expensive way by which, learning happens in these spaces? Because once again, we talk about the youth potential and say that, we just leave this, the way primary schools are manned. Today, if you go to a government school, the number of single teacher schools that exist with 10 children, 15 children, and one teacher teaching the first class, first standard, second standard, third standard, fourth standard, and fifth standard. Because the number of students is only so much. And so these are, once again, areas of major concern when it comes to the early childhood education. And personally, I would say that it is probably the, even more than language learning, it is a space that I kind of dream about a lot. And in this context, I really want to ask Raj Gilda, if he's here, is that all of the things that you talked about in vocational training, which is whether it is carpentry, whether it's cooking, whether it's gardening, whether it is running a shop, all of these things can be reimagined for a 4-year-old. And in reimagining it, there's a lot of learning that can actually happen, which, which of you in this room would say that ABCD is more important than learning how to measure my ingredients and, just bring something together? Which of the people here would ever say that learning 1, 2, 3 is more important than going and, planting a garden and seeing how, what happens? In my building, which is in Chennai, in Gandhinagar, one young girl started taking a fascination to columns. Okay, the column that we draw outside our homes. And as every day, for me, it was like, she was really good at what she was doing. And every day it would be my job to kind of take a picture of the column that she had drawn that morning. And the more that you examine it, I'm saying that how much critical thinking, how much creativity, how much mathematics, how much design thinking, how many elements are actually embedded in just getting the child to actually work with, let us say, just Nalapulli column. I have started learning these terminologies now, because of her. And so when we talk of the Indian knowledge systems that were there, there is such a plethora of ideas, specifically with early learning, that actually that we must not even look outside India in terms of drawing our lessons from. There's so much actually to be drawn from there, whether it is a question of getting the child to understand something like the Katapaya, the manner of narrating a shloka or whatever. It is not the content of the shloka at this point of time that is critical. It is simply the kind of rhythmic patterns, the kind of the scope of mathematical and quantitative thinking that is actually triggered by several of these ideas. So if you're doing carpentry and if you're doing measuring, do I really need to introduce mensuration to you at class 9? Can't I introduce mensuration to you at LKG or UKG? I absolutely can. It is simply that the moment you bottle it into a textbook and then say, I have to give you an exam at the end, that limits your opportunity to introduce it. So which is one of the reasons why very often assessment is the tail that wags the dog. My entire system is based on the fact that there is going to be an assessment, and how do I actually now ensure that all these things that I do, segue into that, point of assessment. I want to take just 2 minutes to share a little video. Let me see if I can do that. Please let me know if you can hear the sound.
Ganga Yamuna Krishna Brahmaputra Narmada Godavari Kaveri Sindhu Saraswati Ganga Yamuna Krishna Brahmaputra Narmada Godavari Kaveri Sindhu Saraswati. Rivers wide, rivers long, rivers small, rivers strong, rivers meet, rivers part, rivers march, rivers start, rivers wide, rivers long, rivers small, rivers strong, rivers meet, rivers part, rivers march, rivers start, Ganga Yamuna Krishna Brahmaputra Narmada Godavari Kaveri Sindhu Saraswati. Rivers flood, rivers dry, rivers fall, rivers rise, rivers young, rivers old, rivers sharp, rivers bold, rivers flood, rivers dry, rivers fall, rivers rise, rivers young, rivers old, rivers shy, rivers bold, Ganga Yamuna Krishna, Brahmaputra Narmada, Godavari Kaveri Sindhu Saraswati.
I'm sorry, are you able to see me back here?
Yeah.
Okay, fine. I've not used Google Meets very often, so I think what Guru was referring to earlier in terms of the many ideas from an environmental perspective that can be introduced. Once again, very often we think about that as that from an emotional standpoint and from a social responsibility standpoint. The idea of the tea seller, teaching his children, the value of integrity and money. All of these are basically embedded in a very big way if these ideas are introduced at a very early stage. So in ECCE, with respect to the NEP policy, I think that there is a lot of, once again, lessons for us to take away in terms of the many ideas that are there. It is eventually, I think, more than anything else, it's up to the educators to now articulate this. It is like a sutra that you will basically need to unravel and say, what is this? How do I make this sutra into something that actually gets done? And what is the design of curriculum? What is the design of syllabus? Specifically, from the point of view of teacher training, because I think that will continue to remain, at least for the next 50 years, in my opinion, will continue to remain a place where teaching must become one of the top aspirations, which it unfortunately is not. We need to, we have to be grateful for the teachers who are coming into this profession, despite the way that we have actually lowered the status of the profession. And we must definitely look at early childhood education as probably an area that we must spend at least 50% of our curriculum in education must be focused on early learning, because eventually, if I want to teach physics, I need somebody who has done physics. The B.Ed part of physics is really needs to be a very small part of it. I would much rather have somebody passionate about physics teaching physics than somebody who is not passionate about physics but goes into teaching and then looks at that. It is necessary to, because building the skill of physics to somebody who's interested in the subject, it is not very difficult. I am a physics graduate myself, so I know how one goes through the school and college through this discipline, and how little is actually taught inside college and how much you actually learn outside college, simply because you're interested and simply because you're passionate and you love the subject there. And in ECC, we have to come to the point of once again creating a much greater level of aspiration in the teacher, more than anything else, and give the necessary tools by which the teacher knows what are the various things that I'm doing here. Much of the work that we have been doing is in simply trying to get more and more people, more and more teachers to understand the fact that try to get them to believe in this experience and exposure without expectations. This is the line that we draw, especially when it comes to ECC, is that you make that experience as rich as you possibly can make. If you're taking 2 minutes of that child, you have a responsibility to make those 2 minutes absolutely most productive, which is also one of the reasons why we work so hard on the content, and not only from our side, across India, we look at the publishing community, education, the resources that are being developed for education. If this deep sense of responsibility comes in, I think between the teachers and between the creators of the process, there's a lot that can happen. And NEP specifically needs to, once the NEP policies gets into the implementation mode, I think specifically needs to look at curriculum in a very, very big way. The NCERT framework, in my opinion, as far as these early years, has very, very nice statements, but when it comes to the specifics, it is just a farce. I mean, there is nothing in the specifics there that I can take away and say, I'm going to construct something out of this. So hopefully, there are many things that I know that I'm being a little bit emotional here, but I have had the luxury, the huge luxury of growing up in Mumbai in a 300 square feet housing board flat, where your parents were there for you, your music teachers came, everything was invested in education. My father was probably one of the greatest educators that I know, where you lived in an environment where that any of us who grew up there could do anything at a later point in life. And so the choices were entirely ours. We were not constrained by our education in any way. And this is something that we know from experience, that at this stage, if the right inputs are given, the child is empowered to see whatever he or she wants. And that is really it is an ECC that you will actually give the child choice. Which is the journey that I want to take. Irrespective of what I want to do, I have solid foundations there. And once again, because there are many teachers here, many B.Ed teachers here, and many B.Ed students here, and M.Ed teachers and students here, I want all of you to, take the early childhood education segment, far more seriously. It's fascinating. We will make the curriculum fascinating, and I'm offering this to you, Liz and Koshy, that in terms of framing of the curriculum, if you want support, I'm more than happy to participate in it. It will be my privilege and pleasure to do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Fantastic, Vish. We will, take you up on your offers, and I'm sure that I have no doubt that you meant it, and that is the spirit of all of us sitting here, who are, who are in a way, outsiders or who are insiders, but we all share the same passion and the same vision. Now we have had an outside-in point of view from a number of eminent panelists who come from different walks of life, who shared shared their points of view on different dimensions. So now, as we know, that is being organized by the MJC, which is where we have a school, a college, and a college of teacher education institution. And like your office, and it is like a small, and a fantastic example of the kind of educational system for the Bharat. This is not the privileged Indians, but for the as we commonly say, the large majority of people whom we refer as the people from Bharat. And I think finally it has to become one, and that is the spirit of that is what we are trying to achieve in this one. We have all the teachers from all these institutions participating, but it is important that we hear from them. They have seen, from their glass, from their filter, how does it look, and how has it changed, or how has it enhanced, or how has it become different from this interaction that we had among all of us. So I'm first requesting my colleague Anitha, the principal of the school, which is starting from from all the way down from the nursery to all the way up to class 12, and she has been great motivator in bringing about a significant cultural change in our school, and giving importance, personally giving importance to early childhood childcare and education, to attending the kind of the exposure they could get. Even I'm so happy to tell you that even in this COVID time, when the whole digital thing was then focusing more on class 11 than 12, she personally took interest and made sure that she is able to relate to this young nursery kids, and also help them to to have a one-to-one review session with all those kids coming from the nursery class in the last week, to see how they are able to cope up with these challenges that is happening. Not like an exam, but to sort of having a dialogue with them. And I'm going to ask Anitha to share in the next 10 minutes what she thinks, how she thinks is going to impact the life of the school and the students and the teachers. Anitha, over to you.
Thank you, sir. Good evening to everyone present there. It's great hearing from all the people who were giving the valuable information regarding this NEP. Really, even when this was introduced, when the whole document was given to us, all the teachers for the suggestions and all, at the first sight, it was really exciting. At the same time, it was a little scary to how it could be implemented. But when I was able to read through the entire content over that, I felt happy, because some of the things already MJC has introduced, sir. That's what I felt. Because even when the language, regarding the language teaching also, everybody knows how we struggled to teach Tamil in class 10. Since it is a multilingual class, how we were struggling to teach Tamil. But the only solution what we found was teaching teaching Tamil through English. That too, as Viswanath sir was saying, it should be functional literacy. That is what we introduced in our school. Even we were able to teach all the memory poems and all through poetry form, or when the children are able to give in the poetry form. Our multilingual children are able to perform better than the native speakers of Tamil. That's what really I felt. And compared to the results also, I'm not talking on the terms of marks at all, because I'm the only principal who used to say to the parents, don't count your child only on the marks. So don't just think that your child is capable of getting 100 marks or 99 marks and all. I never calculate a child based on their marks at all. If a child is capable, or if the child is able to cooperate with us for all the efforts that we taken, definitely we are able to give in. That's what we really think. And that is what we have worked out also. And the results have proved. And I think everybody on board will accept that. That is how we do see this NEP. So even for this language implementation and all, even if the state forces us or the central government or whoever forces us also, we are ready to take it up, because in our campus, we do give this 3 language system. Right from LKG, we do have 3 language system. And how do we give that is, even Hindi, of course, nobody is native speaker of Hindi here except that of a Hindi teacher. So how do we give it to the parents as well as to the children? Even the parents are also asking the same doubt. How can we? So we have found such books which could give English version also. So it is a trilingual book only. That is how we are following, and that is how we are able to implement some of the changes in MJC. So really, I feel very happy that more than what other schools have done, we are already in. That is because of the initiation of Koshy also, that I have to say. So even this coding literacy also, everybody is feeling bad how it could be done, because in every school for ICT classes only 2 periods will be allotted. So in the 2 periods, nothing could be achieved. So how it could be done? So I can give my experience. Earlier, last year, some of the science students from higher secondary classes where they don't have their computer science classes at all, they came to me personally asking they want to get literacy on computer. They do not know anything about computer because till 10th standard, everything was theoretical and maybe 1 or 2 ICT classes they had. So they do not know how to do it. So what I did was, I told them, if you want to learn, you have to spend your extra time. So they finish their lunch in 10 minutes and they will run to my room. So from my room, I requested the computer teacher to give them extra classes, and that has helped the science students, and that has taken them even to the coding competition, which became a NYKA book of records. So our students also became a part of NYKA book of records, what the other institution, that is one KT group of institution was doing. So that is how we have taken it. But all this were the interest shown by Koshy sir, Alice ma'am, and the entire team in MJC. Because of their inspiration or motivation, we are able to take it up. So in the same way, what Guru Melody sir was saying, I'm very much going with Guru Melody sir's message. What is that? If the teacher hasn't got an aptitude to learn, definitely he or she cannot deliver anything useful in the class. It's not about teaching in the class. It's about educating a child how to have a proper life. So it's about giving a life skill education in each class. So I feel that if the teachers take such aptitude to learn or to upscale themselves, definitely MJC will provide a chance, because we have a BEd college there, and they need not go outside for their trainings at all. So for all their multidisciplinary trainings and all, everything is ready at their own reachable distance. So I think it is possible for them to do. And I feel this NEP is not a troublesome thing at all. Policy wise, if everybody feels difficult in the sense, no, we don't feel anything at all. Of course, everything could be implemented. Maybe some practical problems will be there, like partnering with the parents, because parents find it very difficult regarding making the child stay late in the school, even after the schoolers and all. For other tasks, definitely they will have some problems, and even the teachers may have some problems and all. But once when they know that they are going to give a healthier generation, then definitely this will be a good boon to us. That's what we feel.
Thank you, Anitha, for sharing your vision, and I hope that the session had been relevant to even to think further on this. In the coming days, as we were saying earlier, we should sit down and work out an action plan for a whole campus, how we are going to build on this. Now, may I request Dr. Ravi, the principal of BEd and MAT College, the teacher education institution that we have, in how he perceives the how we are going to transform and how this the whole campus become an integrated campus to to train the students as well as the trained set of youngsters to be meaningful educators in different ways, not just in school, but helping them the journey of being an educator, and live up to live up to the expectations of the transformation that the NEP is going. Over to you, Dr. Ravi.
Yeah, good evening, all of you, sir. Really, it is a very wonderful session for us, reviewing the NEP 2020. And first of all, we got to welcome the NEP 2020 after a long period of time, nearly 34 years after, wherein we can see a lot of changes occurred in the NEP 2020, especially teacher education programs. And we know well that there are a lot of changes brought in the NEP 2020 in teacher education programs, especially the qualification, requisite qualification for entering B.Ed is a degree for all levels of teachers, especially in school education levels. That is one thing. And well, there are like that. There are many changes brought in the NEP. But what I feel that, of course, already we are doing many things. What is recommended in the NEP 2020. For example, the evaluation, they are focusing qualitative approach also. So that we are doing now currently for our students. Apart from the qualitative approach, we are given room for qualitative studies or qualitative approach for in evaluation also. Number one. Then we are keenly focusing about three basic areas in teacher education, like pedagogical theories and teaching models, and as well as soft skill development for trainees. So these three are keenly focusing in the new policy on education that we have done. We are doing already for the past 3 to 4 years since. So these are all the things we are doing already. And moreover, according to the NCFT, that is National Curriculum Framework for Teacher Education 2009, what are things suggested in especially the curriculum development and the curriculum designing areas? Those things also we are giving a training for our master level education trainees, like the people who are doing MEd. So these are all things we are giving practices for our students, both UG and PG level. And one more thing I would like to suggest that the core and key dimension of NEP 2020 is the teacher education program would be set up in the highly composite and as well as the multidisciplinary setup only. So in accordance with that, definitely we can say that we, the MJCNs, would be the front runners in terms of implementing all these things, because we have a good and a competent platform to implement such programs in our campus. So I feel strongly that definitely can establish such a programs as recommended in the NEP 2020 in a very coming future, near coming future. And moreover, the NCT's vision and the NCT's approaches towards the creation of a national curriculum framework for teacher education in 2021, the key and component areas that already we are focusing among to our students. So we can probably say that already we are taking our students in the right track about both B.Ed and M.Ed levels. So I feel very happy to say that we, the MJC College of Education, and is following and implemented nearly more than 60% of the recommended areas given in NEP 2020. Then, out of that, another one thing is I would like to point out here that our actually right now, since the NCT is taking a stringent action against standalone and as well as such kind of institutions in all over India. Even now, every month, nearly more than around 100 colleges are going to be withdrawn by the NCT because of low standard in terms of curricular aspects and as well as the infrastructural areas. But we, the MJC, we have strong in all the three key areas, like human resources, and another one is infrastructural facilities, and the third one is instructional facilities. So these three areas we are very strong, so that we can sustain and we can create innovative methods of teaching learning methods for we can deliver towards the school education. So as a whole, I believe that we would be the front runners in implementing the NEP 2020 in very near future. Thank you, sir. Thank you all.
Thank you, Ravi. Now, may I, invite Dr. Nazeema, who is the principal of our College of Arts and Science. As we were saying that, as the MJC and as the time goes by, as this comprehensive center of education, we are going to see the whole, undergraduate and postgraduates learning to be in a multidisciplinary environment. And Dr. Ravi explained how he is preparing, he and his team is preparing for the big change and being ready for that. And may I request Dr. Nazeema to share her point of view, what she thinks about is going to be this the change.
Thank you, sir, and good evening to all. I thank all the organizers at MJC and the panelists for creating an exclusive arena to discuss and radiate your knowledge on the national educational policy. It was each and every point was taken up, and every point had a value in it, which would be incorporated at SNGC in the later on things. Now, as we see the NEP, there is a lot of difference between the previous policies, as Mr. Guru Maladi was telling, like rightly 28 years back, 1992, and previous to that, 1986, the were introduced, and there is a lot of difference when we see the present national educational policy and the previous ones. Now, as you all had quoted, it had a complete overhaul and re-energizing the higher education system as a whole. So, I liked 2 or 3 points when I was just reading through this national educational policy. First of all, it had the list of problems, and then currently which is faced by the higher education system, and then it went on to describe what it was. So just to highlight on, I would like to present the screen of mine, wherein I've just shared what are the different things which can be taken up in the higher education system at MJC. So the first point, what they've quoted is like from the gross enrollment ratio should reach at least 50% by 2035. Now it was in 2018, it is 26.3. Now MJC would be, it is already during the pandemic, we've implemented a lot of open courses, and we are yet to implement certain distance learning programs and also digital programs, so that this ratio can also be increased with MJC2 in the higher education institutions. So I think it will not be a problem, as it has been quoted. The second one is the holistic multidisciplinary education, which Mr. Biju was talking about, Mr. Guru Maladi was talking about, and even Mr. Koshy was talking about, wherein they had given a lot of things about how a course can be taken up, like not based on credits. If a student is taking up one particular course, he can go and take something in maths and something in physics also. So this would be possible to enroll the students throughout the thing. Now, there is a flexible curricular system in this particular NEP. So, and UG course is for 3 to 4 years of duration. That's what they say, and multiple exit and entry and exit points, which is very, very good. Now, the first year they offer a certificate, the second year they offer a diploma, even if the student, in our cases, it's a girls' education, MJC. Now, when a student wants to get married or go to a different place and learn, she can just take 1 year of a certificate and then move on to a different place and learn there, continue even after a year. Or she can take up something like a vocational training, what was stated already, and then it can be taken up. So this is also going to be very good for us. So vocational training, and join in the 3rd year and get a degree, or 4th year it's going to be focusing more onto the major and minor programs. So this major and minor choices, which is going to have that academic rank of credits also, bank of credits also, which is digitally stored. So all these things would be giving her a degree. So this, I think, the only thing which we would need would be good artificial intelligence incorporated with a tracking mechanism, incorporated with artificial intelligence should be strengthened, wherein the fake certificates have also to be monitored, because once they come in with a first year degree, first year certificate or a second year diploma, it has to be monitored. And so all these tracking mechanism, I think the government would be doing it. And when they were talking about multidisciplinary education, they were also talking, Mr. Raj was talking about the vocational training programs which were given to a lot of students in various colleges. Like that, MJC is also giving tailoring. As of now, we give tailoring, baking, and entrepreneurship classes to the students, which is taken up by the students, which also empowers the girl children. Apart from this, we would also be strengthening it much more with the technical education, what is needed as quoted by the NEP. The next point, what I would like to talk about is about the promotion of Indian languages. So I think a normal, even at school, if a kid is going to learn around 3 to 4 languages, it would be very, very good when that particular that particular student comes to a college, she or he will be knowing 3 or 4 languages. And at MJC, we're already doing with 3 languages. Maybe it can be increased to 4 or 5. So across the country, it will be all the Indian languages, and even there can be one global language like a French or Japanese, which can be learned by the student, and it also will be incorporated into the MJC in the future, in the coming years. So the next one is rationalized institutional structure. This, what I felt was here, all the affiliated institutions will be converted into either a university, incorporated with the university, or it can be it will be shifting on to an autonomous college within a span of 15 years. So no affiliated institutions is going to be there under a university. So we are trying, MJC will put efforts in attaining the grade required to move on to the autonomous colleges, and that is what we are trying to do. So I think we are capable of it, and we are working on it. And if it becomes an affiliated institution, it will be affiliated to the constituent colleges, as we know. And the research is also going to be strengthened under National Research Foundation, which is a very good point and very innovative, which will be very, very good for our UG and PG students also. In MJC this year, we have brought in a mini project for every paper. For every paper, a student would be doing a mini project in every paper, which will strengthen the research. And we are also trying to ask the faculty member to publish every year. It should be a teacher or a student should, the PG student, it is mandatory that he or she publishes one paper, one publication in a web science or Scopus or something. Publication is going to become mandatory. So that also, we are trying to strengthen our MJC in research also. And when we look onto the financial support for students, there is a portal called as National Scholarship Portal, and which is already taken a new phase, because last month they had called me and all our BC students, that is backward community students, were asked to enroll in that particular portal. I think the government is having is taken good steps in giving funds to all the students who are in the backward community. And internationalization of education, a very important point, wherein MJC will be looking forward to sign MOU with foreign universities for student exchange and faculty exchange and research and innovations too. So that is also, we are looking forward to do all that in the coming years. And we are happy that there will be a central advisory board of education, which will strengthen our coordination. And so high quality support centers, that is, the government have told that funds would be generated to students who are on the background, economically disadvantaged backgrounds. And Mr. Guru Maladi was talking about the teacher community. So teacher community, he said that in the next 10 years, if a teacher is not passionate about teaching, he or she will not be in the role. So that I think our faculty are already doing with that, and they are passionate about teaching. They had to be trained. So many FTPs are being conducted, and we are also on the run to write all the examinations, which is actually conducted for a collegiate education to become a lecturer. For example, SET or NET, they are taking up all the examinations. Every year, they are asked to take up that particular examination, and the excellence will be incentivized through appropriate rewards so that it can also be, and faculty who is not delivering on basic norms will also be held accountable. And I know that we are regulated on HECI, that is Higher Education Commission of India, from now on. And instead of University Grants Commission, we are going to have Higher Education Grants Council, and the accreditation by National Accreditation Council and the regulation by the National Higher Education Regulatory Council. So Ministry of Education is the MHRD is going to be, from now on, it is going to be under Ministry of Education. So it is, the name itself is going to be having a change. So to conclude, we are very, very happy to have this NEP 2020, and MJC is striving towards it to restore, and we know that it could make India a powerhouse of knowledge and excellence. And also the new education policy will help Indian educational institutions and our students to become creative, critical thinkers. And I like these 2 points. It wants the youth to become job givers and not job seekers. And we are trying to develop a culture in the country where teaching becomes a profession for the skilled and talented people, and not of those who seek it as their last option. So I would, therefore the government must be able to build in more methods for implementation and provide them with liberal funding and good infrastructure. MJC will be doing at most to incorporate NEP into our campus, and we would excel in it. No doubt about it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Nazeema, for that hope and confidence. And I believe that all of this is something that is shared by all our fellow faculty. Today it was a fantastic session, and we have we got the opportunity to listen to multiple points of view, look at NEP from from different filters, and try to absorb the essence of it. We have a pretty large crowd of participants from our College of Education as well as the well-wishers. So now we will have spend a little time to address any specific questions any of our colleagues would may have. Please feel free to ask. You can raise your hand and just say it aloud, or you can type it on our chat board, which we can pick up at and talk. And so do not feel feel pressured or conscious about it. And if there is anything that you want to ask now, please feel free to ask. If you think that you would like to have, if there is some question that you would like us to take up later, please feel free to put that in the chat board, and then we will ask our, fellow panelists who are relevant, who have the relevant thoughts to sort of share the answers back to you. So with this, let me welcome all our fellow faculty members and well-wishers to, join and spend some time in asking some questions if there is some clarification needed. And the floor is open to all.
Koshy, shall I take the liberty of answering a question that's there on the chat?
Sure. Yes.
Who should be a teacher? A person who's technically strong in subject, but a bad presenter, or a person who's a good presenter, passionate to teach too, but technically weak? No subject, as it's very difficult to find both in a person. So that's, I think, a pretty interesting dilemma that Nazeema Madam has posed out there. My personal viewpoint always is passion trumps information. And so if I have somebody who's really passionate, I think providing the right tools and resources will get them to become successful. But this is a matter of opinion, so I'm only giving you my opinion in answering that. So passion is always, especially when it comes to teaching, I'd like to see passionate. I think we all like to see passionate teachers. And if there is something lacking in terms of their subject knowledge, I think that is a gap that is relatively easier to fill.
Thank you. Thank you.
I think, just to add, just to add to what, Sunil spoke about, I think I fully agree with you. I think, at the end of the day, if we were one word to put percentages, I always think it's 90% passion and 10% is subject matter, right? And the fact is that the proof is probably sitting on many of us, other than the two principles here. I cannot certainly fathom any relationship between what I've learned versus what I'm doing, right? So if therefore the technical expertise and the subject content were to have a overbearing impact on how people are shaped in their future lives, at least I'm not qualified to be in the job that I'm in currently. I ought to have been somebody else, right? So I think it's the moment you have passion, one has passion, they will certainly find ways to learn and ways to improve things further, right? And with that, if somebody has 90% of content and subject matter, but only 10% of passion, it just doesn't lead anywhere to that. So I would still vote for passion and aptitude. I think are critical components for a successful teacher.
So Guru, I'd just like to add on to what you said. I completely agree with that because I think passion is a great driver. And if you're passionate, I think it is very easy to pick up on the other facets of, teaching and the subject. But having said that, also, if you look back on your own childhood, I think we all remember teachers in our lives who were passionate. You don't really remember so much about, what the others who were not passionate taught you. But if there was one passionate teacher and he said even one line in your classroom, you remember it still. So it's a great driver, I think.
Thank you, ma'am.
Guru, there is an interesting question. You look at the chat board, and since you earlier discussed about this issue, I'm open, any of you can answer, but I was just asking Guru about the impact of multilingualism being implemented in the college schools, and will it create some kind of a divide? So I'd like to hear from Guru and also from Vish on that question raised by one of our colleagues from the field. Guru, are you able to see the question, or you want me to read it out for you? I'll read it for you. English has been an integral part of our education system, and the English-speaking skill is often seen as a symbol of prestige in our society. Will there be a void between the students of government schools and the private schools, as MEP is going to be emphasizing on learning the regional languages without giving? I think she's trying to see whether it will in any way become a differentiator or will become an enabler. And it's a clarification and doubt and the worry about.
Thanks, Koshy, for that. I think part of the answer is in that question itself, which is that English as a language is seen as a prestige, right? And I think we must start answering that question from that phrase. So I think the more we realize, I think we often confuse ourselves. I think it's either Biju or one of the two have touched up on that point, right? English as a language is different from English as a medium of instruction, right? I'm yet to see. When I say yet to, I'm really generalizing here, but at the cost of it, let me do that. I don't think 80 to 90% of teachers who claim that they teach in English medium, they themselves are proficient in that language, right? Forget about rest of the story in terms of what they're able to communicate and so on and so forth. I personally believe, and as someone, I've studied up to 10+2 was in my mother tongue, right? It's only an undergraduate program that I went into in English medium. I think when we learn English as a language, we not automatically we develop certain amount of affinity towards it. The challenge that we often have is that the moment when we make that as medium of instruction, I'm not suggesting that I'm not being judgmental about whether it's good or bad. My preference would be that the language that's spoken at home should be the language in which people are taught. Now, if you as a family, if you are used to speaking to each other in English at home, by all means, go ahead and admit the child in an English medium school or inculcate that. But if your medium of communication at home is something that's entirely different, then the challenge really is that, particularly in the formative years, the nuance of education is never understood if you do not know the language. And that's where we make this. Even today, when I think about a physics law or a mathematical theorem, I think in my mother tongue. Right? It's only when that I fully understand in a very nuanced way what does that mean and what is the meaning of it. And we should be able to, when we use a certain phrase in a physics or chemistry or mathematics or any sociology or any other subject, we should be able to deconstruct the etymology of that word. We will never be able to grasp what the real meaning of that particular word is or that particular theorem. So I think for me, English as a language is fantastic. One must learn more the merrier. Somebody spoke about French and other languages. I think the more languages that we learn, the inference engines in our brain become more powerful. And that's possibly the reason why, although I don't want to make it blowing our own trumpet, the reason why Indians probably are slightly more or better analytical than any other race that we see on the planet is because we are fundamentally multilingual. It's that multilingual nature of our upbringing and the hardwiring that we have in brain that makes our inference engines much more robust. And in fact, today, countries like Germany and even US, they are in fact, encouraging that whole idea of their students learning multiple languages. So I think English is a language is fantastic. English is a medium of a very personal choice. But are there disadvantages? I think to be practical, yes, because we have a lot of British hangover. We still have this slave mentality where the first time when my father came to visit me in London, he suddenly saw this white woman sleeping on the floor at the airport, and I couldn't get that through his head. Right? He said, "How is it possible that a white woman is sleeping on the floor?" Right? Now that's the kind of regimented indoctrination that I think generations have been through. Luckily, none of us have gone through, so I'm glad about that. But I think there is an element of distinction that happens, or the differentiation that happens in society. But I don't think academically it ever poses any challenge for people to prosper, right? My brother went through the same. Who's older to me. He went through the same education. He went to IIT Madras. He went to UCLA for his MBA. He's a PhD from UCLA. He's a professor in the US. And I don't think we ever felt that the medium of instruction was a restriction for him. Lack of awareness is yes, it was a problem for him. We didn't have too much of knowledge and information when we were in the village. But once if we broke that barrier, language merely, it probably took 6 months for us to be proficient in speaking to people, but fundamentally it never challenged our existence. Of course, it's my own our own experience. It could be different for others, but I don't think that we should make decisions based on that. I don't think it's a factor that really influences at all.
I would just like, so it is in no way, the intention is no way deny the opportunity to learn this language. In fact, Vish, since you have a very, very, way of teaching this language and building language skills for the students, I think we should sort of emphasize the fact in no way it is going to, the intention is not to deny the opportunity of not learning this language and use this language to access significant amount of relevant material available all over the world, because the number of probably material, the material available will be very, very broad in this English, because of whatever history that was the way in which the world developed. But so I would incidentally, not just Guru, out of this, panelists, at least I know three of us, you, me, and and Biju, all come from vernacular schools till our +2, and we are where we are not because of the privileged, convent education that we managed, or we were, in any way limited because that was, not available. To be very honest, at those point of time, I'm sure, because as Annie very correctly said, it was we felt that we are lesser children of the. I mean, at least I remember thinking that I'm I'm the child of the lesser God, because I was not at that privileged, the convent education, and in fact, we have a joke, say that we used to, in fact, to differentiate, the privileged English kids. We used to call them the shit gang. Okay. In fact, incidentally, so that was the way of. Sometimes it's a way of joke, and sometimes it's a way of expressing the own insecurities. So I can very well appreciate the thought that Annie has shared. But I would like to say that I will wish to sort of highlight the very relevance of developing language skills, as well as which is sort of in a country like India where it's comfortable to pick up this and use this for accessing quite a lot of relevant material. I wish to express your thoughts, Wish.
So I have 3 points. The first point, as with all of you, my father studied in Malayalam medium until class 10, and his English is impeccable at a later point in time, because he did learn English in the later part of his school, probably as a subject, but nobody really spoke English. So this whole idea that English is not knowing English is necessarily a limitation is not a valid idea at all. And I think it's very unfortunate that we look at it as a prestige issue or a privilege issue. I don't think it should be that way. That said, the second point that I come to is, how have we actually built our education system specifically in India? You have the moment you now step out of class 12, I think that maybe you escaped a certain time, the time period. Today, an IIT, a student from a non-English medium enters the IITs. There is a challenge. There is a genuine challenge that the child faces, because English has not been delivered in any manner possible in the schooling years, because the English has been really just a question of assessment and gaining marks. If any of you look at the CBSE syllabus of, not CBSE syllabus, any of the state syllabuses of class 12 in English, it is very tough. One has to know a lot of English to be able to, pass that exam. But everybody does, because of the fact that the assessment process is such a sham, the learning process is such a sham. And so you have, this was a question that once a government official in Maharashtra asked about, ये English क्यों चाहिए? Because of course I don't, our conversation, Marathi or Hindi bus hai. So I said, Marathi or Hindi bus hai, but can I ask you in which 2 languages your state government website is in? It is there in Marathi and it is there in English. So somewhere, you go to any of these places, the second language is not the common language of Hindi, but the second language has become English. So we have, in a sense, boxed ourselves into a corner. And increasingly so over the years, because the quality of your schooling in the local medium has been deprived of an opportunity to really be of the quality that it needs to be. So you have very, very few institutions that teach in the regional language that have even that minimum quality that somehow or the other, all the resources are moved in the direction of English. And that is, we can keep criticizing the social, oversight of society at large of having allowed that to happen. But today's reality is exactly that. And because and then the third point that I want to make is the fact that, as we have all said, learning and becoming proficient in multiple languages is not a problem if the language is introduced well. So in a very, very migratory space like India, how am I going to, deal with a child who moves from, let us say, Andhra Pradesh to Orissa to Punjab? How am I going to actually run away from the idea that I need a common language and that common language is not Hindi? How does a child who moves at 5 from one medium to another medium to a third medium or fourth medium, where is the comfort going to be there? So the idea is one of being able to offer choices, number one, in terms of the institutional quality across multiple languages. The second idea is to also empower the child with choices, that if I want to learn in Tamil, I have the ability to learn in Tamil. If I want to learn in English, I have the ability to learn in English. I think the second opportunity is easier done than the first one, because the first one requires a very huge systemic change, because we've gotten into this position. I don't think that it's a nice position. Each of our states is bigger than most countries. So we have enough resources to have developed the higher education, the entire education system in Tamil or Malayalam or any of these things. I don't think it was a matter of are there enough takers. There have always been enough takers, there still are, but we have somewhere neglected to do so. We can find fault, but I think the current situation is that English becomes essential. English has become aspirational. Also in a more connected world, I think despite the advances that we are making with Google Translate and translated websites and everything, at a higher order, I think most of the resources are available much, much more in English than they are available in our own languages. So given these two factors of, one, institutionally, how have we boxed ourselves into this corner? And two, in a technologically connected world, English is definitely an advantage for me to just go into the MIT lab, massive open online course and learn from there, or learn from anywhere, in the world that is there. So the third point is where the solution is. Ensure that Tamil happens beautifully, ensure that English happens beautifully, ensure that Malayalam happens beautifully, and ensure that the child has the choice of saying that whichever language I'm being taught in, I'm capable of learning it. This is not a pipe dream. There are many, many, many instances of people who are equally strong in two languages, whenever both languages have been imbibed well and the opportunity has been offered very well. So this is a webinar by itself, by the way. I think we're trying to answer a very complex question, and a question with too many external factors that need to be considered in a very short time frame.
Thank you, Vish. Biju, would you like to share your thoughts on this?
No, I don't have anything to add. I think both Guru and what CP said, I think is perfectly I agree with that.
Thank you. Thank you, guys. Any more questions? As I said, feel free to ask. Don't feel shy. Or if you want to ask the questions later, we want this to be answered later, please feel free to send a mail and we will consolidate and give you the input. And I can guarantee you that, considering the importance of this topic and how it is going to affect the life of MJC, of the teachers, its faculty and its students, and how we are going to grow in the coming years, we will have more detailed, more focused sessions on each of this topic. As Vish said, the things that is covered in this MEP are so broad and so extensive that there is a need for us to probably take up each component, not just as an NEP as total, but each of this component and delve deeper into it to appreciate and be ready for in the coming years. So with this, it is time for us to close. It has been a pretty long day, but it has been really exciting and energizing. So may I ask Liz to express a sincere vote of thanks to all the people who have participated, the panelists and the participants.
Hi, everybody. First of all, Guru, I think you sparked the thought of bringing this whole session together. So thank you for that. I think as educators, we have a huge role to play in this whole thing of creating learning spaces which spark passion, vibrancy, and creativity, wherein the students can have a deeper understanding of their subjects, create more, analytical thinking, promote curiosity, open the vistas of lifelong learning. And at MJC, we have such a beautiful, fertile ground for that, and it's great that we all have that role to play. We also, so that we can create better future citizens of the world as well, where we learn to tolerate and respect our neighbors, where we are able to remove the gender bias, where there is more ethical kind of thinking in everything that we do. So there's a huge task ahead of us in terms of training for faculty, in terms of the whole teaching and learning process that we have to change. And, the fact that we've had this whole Jugalbandi kind of thing going on today online with Vesh, Guru, Biju, Raj, Koshy. Thank you so much, because I think you've made it more interesting. When you look at that huge document of NEP and you just shy away from it and say, oh God, how can I go through this whole thing and how can I get one there? I think you've been able to really unravel it for us, but we have to take those beautiful threads together and weave that tapestry on our campus now. So that's what, thank you so much for doing that. To Nazeema, to Dr. Ravi, Anita, Mathew and Divya behind the scenes as well. Thank you so much for putting this together. And to the three heads of the institution, you've managed to bring the faculty, all your faculties together and debate about this. I'm sure you've had an interesting time with them as well in the past. We've got a great job to do ahead of us. And thanks to all of the students and teachers who've been there online listening as well. Thank you, everybody.
You all, it's time for us to close and have a great weekend. We will connect on this further. Goodbye.
Thank you, Koshy.